They say in the void, no one can hear you scream. They're wrong. The void hears everything. It remembers. It feeds. What I'm about to tell you isn't a tale of glory or redemption. This isn't a story of the Emperor's faithful prevailing against Xeno's scum. This is a confession, a testimony of what happens when you dig too deep into places that should remain buried, when you disturb tombs that were sealed not to keep intruders out, but to keep something far worse contained within. My name is Watchmaster Klaus Reinhardt, formerly of the 143rd Siege Regiment, Death Korps of Krieg. I am the last survivor of what the Administratum will call Incident Designate Null Whisper 7. But that sanitized designation doesn't capture the truth. It doesn't convey the horror, the silence that screamed, the darkness that saw us, the stone that remembered every agony ever inflicted upon it. I write this account not for absolution. We Kriegers abandoned that luxury when we poisoned our own world. I am writing this because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that there are worse fates than dying for the Emperor. There are places where death would be a mercy. Salvar's moon was one of them. Welcome back to the abyss. To those who endure, I thank you. And to the new souls, subscribe to Voidborn Terrors and strike the bell before the next horror finds you first. Tonight, the Tomb of Silent Screams. Let's dig into the tombs, faithfuls. The first excavation team arrived on Salvar's moon 3 weeks before we did. 27 personnel, archaeo specialists, mineral surveyors, adeptus mechanicus tech priests, and a protective detail of Astra Militarum regulars from the Mordian Iron Guard. Standard Imperial protocol for surveying dead worlds on the eastern fringe. I've listened to their Vox logs. All of them. Again and again, searching for the moment when routine became a nightmare. The Administratum sealed most of them, but I made copies before they purged the records, before they tried to forget what happened there. The first log is mundane. Survey Leader Castellan reports discovering an artificial cavity 17 kilometers beneath the moon's crust, promising mineral deposits, unusual architectural features. He sounds excited, the kind of excitement only someone who's never encountered the truly ancient can muster, the kind of naivety that gets people killed in this galaxy. Day 3, the tone shifts. Castellan mentions geometric impossibilities in the structure, corridors that shouldn't support their own weight, angles that hurt to look at directly. One of the Mechanicus adepts, Magos Vrel, becomes obsessed with the black stone composing the walls. He calls it necrodermis, though his voice wavers when he speaks the word, like saying it aloud might summon something. He was right to be afraid. Day 7, the first anomaly. A survey team ventures deeper into the structure and loses Vox contact for 47 minutes. When contact resumes, the team leader, Sergeant Markov, sounds different. Flat, emotionless. He reports no complications, but 3 of his men are missing. He can't explain where they went, or rather he won't. When pressed, he simply repeats, "They went into the walls. The walls needed faces. The walls needed faces." I've replayed that phrase 10,000 times. It still makes my skin crawl beneath my rebreather. Day 9. Survey Leader Castellan files a request for immediate evacuation. The request is denied. Mineral extraction operations are too valuable to abandon over unsubstantiated anxieties and equipment malfunctions. The Administratum doesn't believe in hauntings. They believe in quotas. Day 11, the screaming starts. The Vox logs become fragmented after this point. Bursts of static, desperate voices cutting in and out. One of the Mordian guardsmen, Private Kellic, can be heard sobbing, begging for something to stop looking at him. There's nothing in the archaeological record that suggests anything was there. No contacts, no movement, no thermal signatures. But Private Kellick knew something was watching. Day 13 brings the final transmission. It's only 43 seconds long, but those 43 seconds have been burned into my memory like a brand. I can recite every word, every gasp, every terrible silence between the words. Castellan's voice, barely recognizable through layers of distortion and what sounds like whispered echoes speaking simultaneously with him. This is Survey Leader Castellan to any Imperial vessel in range. The structure is not archaeological. Repeat, not archaeological. It's a prison, a trap. The geometry is designed to... Static. Then Magos Vrel's voice, mechanical and dispassionate. The walls remember. They have always remembered. They remember screaming. More static. Then sounds. Emperor, forgive me, the sounds. Choking. Wet tearing. Impact of flesh on stone. And beneath it all, a resonance, like a tuning fork struck in the deepest pit of hell. Then silence. Not the silence of an ended transmission. The silence of something listening. When the Vox log cuts off, it leaves behind a frequency pattern the Mechanicus couldn't explain. A waveform that shouldn't exist, that seemed to encode information beyond sound. Several tech priests who analyzed the raw data later experienced what the Medicae called catastrophic psychological degradation. One carved spirals into his augmetic arms until he bled coolant and blood in equal measure. Another removed his own Vox augmeter and tried to eat it, claiming he needed to stop the voices from getting out. The Administratum declared the excavation site lost, mineral extraction operations suspended. The moon is designated Quarantine Ultima, pending further investigation. That's when they sent us. The Death Korps of Krieg doesn't get sent to investigate. We get sent to die productively, to hold lines that can't be held, to march into toxic wastes and irradiated hellscapes without hesitation, to do the Emperor's ugly work while the glory regiments collect their laurels. We are already dead men. We died on Krieg 500 years ago, when our world chose annihilation over surrender. Everything since has been borrowed time, a chance to earn redemption through suffering. So when the 143rd Siege Regiment received orders to deploy to Salvar's moon, to enter the structure and determine the fate of the excavation team, we didn't question. We didn't hesitate. We loaded our laser guns, checked our rebreathers, and prepared to descend into the dark. I remember standing in the dropship's cargo bay, looking at the faces around me. 50 battle-hardened Kriegers in weathered greatcoats and gas masks. Not one of them showed fear. Fear is a luxury for those who value their lives. We valued only duty, only the chance to repay our world's ancient shame with blood and sacrifice. Commissar Ghent stood at the front of the bay, his leather coat immaculate, his bolt pistol gleaming. He was young for a commissar, barely 30, but he'd earned his position through zealotry and ruthlessness. He'd executed 17 men for cowardice in the previous campaign and wore their dog tags on his belt as trophies. Kriegers, he said, his voice cutting through the dropship's engine roar. You have been chosen because you are already damned. This moon holds nothing that can frighten those who crawled from the ashes of their own world. Whatever killed the excavation team will learn that death holds no terror for the Death Korps. We responded as one, our voices muffled by rebreathers but unified in purpose. For Krieg, for redemption, for the Emperor. The dropship shuddered as it entered Salvar's moon's thin atmosphere. Through the viewport, I could see the surface, grey, lifeless, pocked with craters and fissures. Nothing grew here. Nothing lived. It was a corpse of a moon orbiting a corpse of a planet, forgotten in a forgotten system on the edge of Imperial space. Perfect place for a tomb. The excavation site came into view. A cluster of prefabricated structures surrounding a massive drilling aperture that descended into the moon's crust like a throat. The structures were dark. No lights, no power signatures, no signs of life. We touched down in a cloud of grey dust. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and cold air rushed into the cargo bay, thin, dry, tasting of stone and metal. We filed out in perfect formation, boots crunching on loose regolith. The silence was immediate and oppressive, not the peaceful quiet of an empty world, but something else, something expectant, like the held breath before a scream. Sergeant Voss, our squad leader, activated his auspex. The screen flickered, showing chaotic readings. "Massive subterranean structure," he reported, his voice crackling through the vox. "Extends at least 50 kilometers in all directions. Composition unknown. Interference patterns suggest." He paused. "Suggests an active energy source. Something's powered down there." Commissar Gent drew his bolt pistol. "Then we wake it up and kill it. Standard search and sweep pattern. First squad takes point. The second squad provides support. Third squad secures the extraction point. Move out." We moved toward the drilling aperture, our laser guns ready, our eyes scanning for threats. The prefabricated structures were abandoned but intact. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies. Personal effects remained. Half-eaten rations, data slates still displaying work logs, pictures of families and loved ones that would never see their owners again. It was as if the excavation team had simply walked away from their lives and descended into the dark. The aperture was wider than I'd expected, 30 meters across, with a spiral ramp carved into its sides. Emergency lighting still functioned, casting everything in sickly yellow. The ramp descended at a steep angle, circling down and down into depths that swallowed the light. Specialist Roth, our demolitions expert, peered over the edge. "Throne," he muttered. "It's like staring into the warp." "Eyes forward, soldier," Commissar Gent snapped. "The Emperor protects those who do their duty. Remember that, and nothing in this hole can touch you." I wish that were true. We began our descent in single file, mag boots gripping the ramp's surface. The temperature dropped rapidly. Our breath condensed in clouds that hung in the still air like ghosts. The emergency lighting flickered occasionally, casting strobing shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. 500 meters down, we found the first sign of the excavation team. A helmet, Mordian Iron Guard issue, lying on its side in the center of the ramp. No blood, no signs of damage, just a helmet, perfectly preserved, as if someone had carefully removed it and placed it there. Sergeant Voss picked it up. The interior was clean. No sweat stains, no hair, nothing that suggested it had ever been worn. "Sir," he said, addressing the commissar, "this doesn't make sense. Standard protocol requires environmental suits at these depths. Why would anyone remove their helmet?" Commissar Gent examined the helmet, then tossed it over the edge of the ramp. We listened to it clatter and bounce, the sound echoing for far too long before fading into silence. "They weren't thinking clearly," Gent said. "Oxygen deprivation, perhaps, or simple cowardice. Keep moving." But I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes lingered in the darkness below. He felt it too, the wrongness, the sense that we weren't descending into a structure, but into something alive, something aware. 1,000 meters down, the carved stone changed. The smooth, artificial walls of the access ramp gave way to something else entirely. Black stone, shot through with green veins that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. The geometry became aggressive, angles that violated Euclidean principles, surfaces that seemed to recede even as you approached them. Necrodermis, living metal. Xenos architecture from before humanity crawled from the mud of old Earth. We had found the tomb, and it had been waiting for us. The ramp ended at a massive doorway, 20 meters high, carved from a single piece of black stone. Glyphs covered its surface, twisting and coiling in patterns that hurt to follow. Some of the glyphs seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new configurations. Magos Vrel had been right. This was necrodermis. This was Necron architecture. But the Necrons had been dormant for millennia. Their tomb worlds were scattered across the galaxy, dead and silent. Whatever civilization had built these structures had turned themselves into machines and gone to sleep, waiting for a future that might never come. So why did it feel like something in this tomb was already awake? Specialist Carl, our tech specialist, approached the doorway with his auspex raised. The device screamed with interference, its screen filling with cascading errors. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures beyond this door. Power levels consistent with..." He stopped, staring at his readings. "Consistent with active defensive systems. Sir, this facility is operational." Commissar Gent stepped forward, pressing his palm against the black stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the green veins in the stone flared, light racing across the door's surface in spreading webs. The glyphs aligned, locking into final configurations. The door opened, not smoothly like a machine. It opened like a throat, segments of stone sliding past each other with the wet sound of meat parting. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, carrying scents of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. Beyond the doorway stretched a corridor, black stone walls covered in carvings, carvings of faces, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands. Every surface was a tapestry of faces frozen in expressions of absolute agony, mouths stretched wide in screams, eyes bulging with terror, skin peeled back to reveal muscle and bone. The faces were rendered in perfect, horrifying detail. So perfect, they seemed almost three-dimensional, as if they might push free from the stone at any moment. "Emperor preserve us," someone whispered through the vox. Commissar Gent silenced him with a look. "First squad, advance. Light discipline. Watch your sectors." We entered the corridor. Our lamps cut through the darkness, illuminating the walls in sweeping arcs. Every surface was carved. Every centimeter was screaming stone. The faces seemed to watch us as we passed, their dead eyes tracking our movement. Some of them looked almost familiar, human faces, or close enough to humans that the differences were subtle and disturbing. 20 meters in, Trooper Hess stopped walking. He was staring at the wall to his left, his lamp fixed on a particular section of carvings. "Hess," Sergeant Voss snapped, "keep moving." Hess didn't respond. He took a step toward the wall, reaching out with one gloved hand. "That's me," he whispered. "That's my face." We all turned our lamps on the wall. And there, carved among thousands of other screaming faces, was a face that looked exactly like Trooper Hess. Same facial structure, same scars, same expression of absolute terror. "It's a coincidence," Sergeant Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Similar features. Nothing more." Hess pressed his hand against the carved face. The stone beneath his palm was warm. "No," he said. "No, this is me. This is..." The face moved. Not much. Just a slight shift, the mouth opening wider, the eyes focusing on Hess. Hess screamed and stumbled backward, falling against the opposite wall. His scream echoed down the corridor, bouncing back to us in distorted waves. But beneath his scream, I heard something else. The stone was screaming too. Every carved face was opening wider, and from their mouths came sounds not audible, but felt. Vibrations in the bones, pressure in the skull, silent screams. Fall back, Commissar Gent ordered. Fall back to the entrance. We ran. Emperor, forgive us. We ran. Years of discipline and training were shattered by primal terror. Our boots pounded on black stone as we fled back toward the doorway, toward light and sanity. Behind us, the corridor filled with sound that wasn't sound. The pressure built until it felt like my head would split open. Blood trickled from my nose, warm beneath my rebreather. Others were bleeding too, ears, eyes, noses. The stone was screaming directly into our minds. We burst through the doorway and collapsed on the ramp, gasping, bleeding, our thoughts scattered like shrapnel. The doorway remained open, darkness spilling out like smoke. Commissar Gent was the first to recover. He grabbed Trooper Hess by his greatcoat and hauled him upright. What did you see? What did you touch? Hess's eyes were wide behind his gas mask lenses, pupils dilated with shock. My face, he stammered, my face in the stone. It was screaming. It was... He looked down at his hands. It was warning me. Warning you of what? That I'm already dead, Hess whispered. That we're all already dead. We died the moment we entered this place. The tomb doesn't kill you. It remembers you. It remembers you screaming forever. Commissar Gent released him and drew his bolt pistol in one smooth motion. The shot echoed like thunder in the confined space. Hess's head exploded, blood and brain matter spraying across the black stone. The corpse collapsed. We stared at it, at what remained of Trooper Hess. The Commissar's summary execution had been quick, efficient, and according to regulations. Executing a soldier showing cowardice in the face of the enemy. But Hess hadn't shown cowardice. He'd shown understanding. Any other man wants to share his faithless delusions, Commissar Gent said, his voice cold. Step forward now. I'll grant you the Emperor's mercy, same as Hess. No one moved. Good. We continue the mission. The Emperor demands we investigate this structure, and by the throne, we will investigate. First squad, reform. Second squad, take point. We're going back in. I looked at the doorway, at the darkness beyond, in the corridor filled with screaming stone, and I knew with absolute certainty that Trooper Hess had been right. We were already dead. Duty is the only virtue that matters to a Krieg, not courage. Courage implies you have a choice, not loyalty. Loyalty suggests the possibility of betrayal. Only duty. The cold, merciless mathematics of obligation and sacrifice. I had performed my duty on 17 worlds, walked through rad wastes that would kill an unprotected man in minutes, held trenches against heretic hordes until the mud ran red, watched brothers die by the thousands, and felt nothing but grim satisfaction that their deaths had meaning, had purpose. But standing at the threshold of that Necron tomb, staring into darkness that seemed to stare back, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Doubt. Not doubt in the Emperor, not doubt in the mission, doubt in something more fundamental, doubt in my ability to maintain the cold, rational discipline that defined the Death Korps. Because the tomb wasn't just a structure. It was wrong in ways that bypassed reason and spoke directly to the hindbrain, to the parts of human consciousness that evolved to fear the dark and the unknown. The second squad formed up at the doorway. 10 Kriegers, identical in their greatcoats and gas masks, indistinguishable from each other. That's how we prefer it. In the Death Korps, individuality is a weakness. We are instruments, tools of the Emperor's will, and tools don't need names or personalities. But I found myself noting details. The way Specialist Roth habitually checked his demolition charges. The slight tremor in Trooperman's hands. The way Sergeant Voss stood a half step ahead of his squad, as if personally shielding them from what lay ahead. These men were my brothers, Not in blood, but in suffering. We had survived Krieg's toxic surface together, earned our great coats in the same trenches, bled the same radioactive mud, and I was about to lead them into hell. "Second squad," I said through the Vox, my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my gut. "Standard sweep pattern. Watch your corners. Don't touch the walls. If you see anything at all that resembles a familiar face, report it immediately. Do not approach. Do not engage. Understood?" "Yes, Watchmaster," they responded in unison. Commissar Gent stood beside me, his bolt pistol holstered, but his hand resting on the grip. "Watchmaster Reinhardt," he said quietly, "the commissariat has been monitoring morale. There are concerns. Several soldiers have reported auditory hallucinations, whispers, voices speaking in Gothic, but the words don't make sense. With respect, sir, we're in a Xenos structure. Psychological pressure is expected." "Psychological pressure I can handle. What I cannot handle is weakness. If your men show cowardice, I will execute them. If you show cowardice, I will execute you. The Death Korps does not retreat. We do not falter. We do not fail." I met his gaze. Behind his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. The commissar was afraid, and his fear was making him dangerous. Not dangerous to the enemy, dangerous to us. "Understood, sir," I said. "We won't fail." We entered the corridor for the second time. The carved faces watched our approach. I'd ordered the men not to look directly at them, to focus on the path ahead, but it was impossible. The carvings drew the eye, demanded attention. They were too detailed, too perfect. Art like this required obsession. It required studying the exact moment when hope becomes despair, when flesh becomes agony. Someone had carved these faces while people screamed. 50 meters in, the corridor branched. Left and right passages, identical in appearance, stretching into darkness. Sergeant Voss consulted his auspex, frowning at the readings. "Sir, I'm getting interference. Multiple signals, all broadcasting on the same frequency. It's like..." He adjusted the device's settings. "It's like the structure itself is generating noise. White noise, but with patterns embedded in it. Almost like speech. Can you isolate it?" He worked the controls, then activated his Vox bead. A sound filled our helmets, crackling static laced with something underneath. Whispers. Dozens of them, speaking simultaneously in High Gothic. I caught fragments. "Emperor cannot hear you here. The stone remembers flesh. Already screaming, already dead already. They wear your face, they wear your..." Sergeant Voss shut off the broadcast. "Sir, that's impossible. This structure has been dead for millennia. There's no power source for Vox transmission. Nothing that could." "Then where's it coming from?" Trooper man interrupted, his voice cracking with strain. "Where are the voices coming from?" "Discipline, man," I snapped. "It's interference. Echoes from our own Vox systems bouncing back. Nothing more." But I didn't believe that. None of us did. We took the left passage. It descended at a sharp angle, the walls pressing in until we had to proceed single file. The carvings changed here, no longer just faces, but whole scenes. Figures being flayed alive, populations kneeling before skeletal machines, pyramids constructed from screaming bodies. The story of a civilization's end, recorded in stone. The story of what the Necrons did before they turned themselves into machines. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't a tomb. This was a monument, a testament to the Necrons' cruelty, their absolute dominion over flesh. They hadn't just conquered their enemies, they'd immortalized their suffering. "Watchmaster," Specialist Roth voxed from the rear of the column. "Something's wrong with my suit's environmental controls. Temperature readings are spiking, 40 degrees, 45, 50. I checked my own readouts. Normal. 20 degrees Celsius is standard for underground structures. Roth, your sensors are malfunctioning. Reboot and 60 degrees, sir. 65. I'm burning. I can feel it. My skin is burning. I turned. Roth was clawing at his great coat, tearing at the heavy fabric. His movements were frantic, panicked, completely uncharacteristic for a Krieg. Roth, stand down. Your sensors are damaged. You're not. He ripped off his rebreather. His face was red, flushed with heat, sweat pouring down his face. But the temperature was normal. The air was cold. I'm burning, he gasped. Can't you feel it? The walls are hot. The stone is burning. He pressed his bare hand against the wall. The scream that tore from his throat wasn't human. It was a sound of absolute agony, the kind of scream that comes when every nerve is firing simultaneously. His hand stuck to the stone, flesh sizzling, smoke rising from the point of contact. But the stone was cold. I could see frost on its surface. Pull him back, I ordered. Sergeant Voss grabbed Roth around the waist and yanked him away from the wall. Roth's palm came free, leaving a layer of skin adhered to the stone. The skin immediately merged with the carvings, becoming part of the endless tapestry of suffering. And in that skin I saw a face forming, Roth's face, mouth open in a scream. Roth collapsed, cradling his ruined hand. It's burning, he sobbed. Still burning. Can't stop burning. Please, Emperor, make it stop. Commissar Gent approached, drawing his bolt pistol. No. I stepped between them. Sir, he's injured. Not compromised. He needs medical attention, not execution. He removed his rebreather in a hostile environment. He broke formation. He is a liability. He's a soldier following phantom sensory input. The structure is attacking his mind. That's not cowardice. That's enemy action. Gent's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he would shoot me too. Then he holstered the pistol. Bind his wound. If he shows any further deviation from discipline, I'll execute him and you. Understood, Watchmaster? Yes, sir. We treated Roth's hand as best we could, with synthetic skin spray, pain suppressors, and bandages. He sat against the wall, shaking, muttering about heat and burning and the stone that remembered flesh. His eyes were glassy, distant. Whatever the tomb had done to him, it had broken something fundamental in his mind. While we worked, I noticed something. The carved face that had absorbed Roth's skin, his face, screaming, was moving. Slowly, imperceptibly, but moving. The mouth opening wider. The eyes are tracking, following Roth as he sat there. I didn't mention it. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share. We continued deeper. The passage widened into a chamber, circular chamber, 50 meters across, the ceiling lost in darkness above. The floor was smooth black stone, and in the center stood a plinth. On the plinth rested a device, a sphere of green crystal, fractured and reassembled, held together by threads of living metal. The sphere pulsed with light in irregular patterns. Each pulse sent waves of pressure through the air, like silent thunder. Sergeant Voss approached it cautiously, auspex raised. It's a power source, he reported, but unlike anything I've seen. It's not generating energy, it's storing something. Information, maybe. Or the sphere pulsed brighter. Every carved face on the walls opened its mouth in unison, and the chamber filled with screams. Not sound, pressure. Information is encoded directly into the brain, bypassing the ears and auditory nerves. The sensation of screaming is transmitted as raw data, flooding consciousness with agony that wasn't yours, but felt more real than your own memories. I dropped to my knees, hands pressed against my helmet, trying to block out something that couldn't be blocked. Around me, the rest of the second squad was doing the same, writhing, collapsing, bleeding from noses and ears as their brains tried to process input they weren't designed to handle. Through the chaos, I saw Commissar Ghent still standing. His face was twisted in a rictus of pain, but he remained upright, bolt pistol drawn, aiming at the crystal sphere. "Xenos, abomination," he gasped. "By the Emperor's will," he fired. The bolt round struck the sphere dead center. For an instant, time seemed to freeze, the projectile suspended in the air, the sphere's light dimming, the screams reaching a crescendo that threatened to shatter my sanity. Then the sphere shattered. Crystal fragments exploded outward in a wave of green light. They struck the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and where they hit, the stone changed. The carved faces became three-dimensional, pushing out from the surface like drowning men reaching for air. Their mouths opened wider, impossibly wide, and from those mouths came actual sound. Screaming, real, audible screaming, billions of voices, all crying out in agony, all compressed into a single moment of unbearable noise. The sound wave hit like a physical force. I felt my ribs crack, felt blood vessels burst into my eyes. I felt the pressure building in my skull until I was certain it would split open like overripe fruit. Then, abruptly, silence. Total, absolute silence. Not the silence of ended sound, but the silence of sound negated. The silence of a void that swallowed everything. I opened my eyes. The chamber was dark. Our lamps had all failed. But there was light. Green bioluminescence spreading across the walls like an infection, illuminating the faces. They were still three-dimensional, still pushing out from the stone. Some had pushed far enough that I could see shoulders, chests, hands, all of them frozen mid-scream. All of them are staring at us. Commissar Ghent lay on the floor, blood pooling around his head. He'd been closest to the sphere when it detonated. The explosion had killed him instantly. Good way to die, I thought distantly. Quick, painless. Better than what's coming for the rest of us. "Watch, Master." Sergeant Voss's voice was hoarse. What did we do?" I looked at the fragments of the sphere, scattered across the chamber floor. Each fragment still glowed with internal light, pulsed with that horrible rhythm. We hadn't destroyed the device. We'd just broken it into smaller pieces, released whatever it had been containing. "We woke it up," I said. "The tomb. We woke it up." The figures on the walls began to move. Have you ever watched someone drown? Not in water, in stone. I have. I watched Trooper Kellerman sink into solid rock while he screamed for help I couldn't give. Watched the stone flow around him like liquid, sealing over his face, leaving only the imprint of his terror preserved in its surface. The Necrons perfected cruelty in ways we can barely comprehend. They turned suffering into a science, into an art form, and this tomb, this monument to their malevolence, was their masterpiece. After the crystal sphere shattered, after Commissar Ghent died and the figures in the walls began to move, we did the only thing we could. We ran back through the corridor with its screaming carvings, ran toward the entrance and the promise of light and sanity. We didn't make it. The corridor had changed. The branching passages that had been behind us were now ahead. The entrance was gone, replaced by more passage, more stone, more carved faces. The tomb was reconfiguring itself, rearranging its architecture like a puzzle box, trapping us inside. "Impossible," Sergeant Voss said, checking his auspex. "The entrance should be north-northwest." "Should be right." He stopped. The Auspex screen was displaying gibberish symbols that shifted and changed, forming patterns that hurt to look at. It's dead. All our navigation equipment is compromised. Third squad voxed in. Watchmaster, we've lost contact with base. Vox is down. We're trapped at the entrance. Something sealed the doorway. Black stone, same material as the tomb walls. It just grew across the opening. We tried breaching charges, didn't even scratch it. My blood went cold. The tomb wasn't just trapping us, it was sealing itself, creating a closed system with us inside. Can you cut through with las cutters? Negative. The stone absorbs the energy. It's like cutting shadow. I made the decision. Abandon the entrance. Find an alternative route. Regroup with us at... I checked our position, trying to correlate it with the excavation team's maps. At coordinates 372, old survey post. We should have supplies, Vox equipment, maybe a way to. Static erupted across the Vox channel. Not the clean static of interference, but something else. Voices. Thousands of them, all talking over each other. There is no escape. The tomb feeds. Flesh to stone, stone to memory. Scream forever, scream always. Your face will join the walls. I killed the Vox. The silence that followed was worse than the voices. We were 23 now. 23 Kriegers from an initial force of 50. The rest were scattered throughout the tomb, or dead, or something worse than dead. The hierarchy had collapsed with Commissar Gent's death. I was a senior watchmaster, which meant command fell to me by default. Command of what? A handful of lost soldiers in an alien labyrinth that was actively trying to kill us, or worse, trying to make us part of itself. All squads, I transmitted, hoping some of the Vox network still functioned. New objective, survival. Find shelter, conserve ammunition. Do not engage hostile contacts unless necessary. Do not trust your senses. Do not touch the walls. Do not. Trooper man grabbed my arm. Sir, look. He was pointing at the floor, at footprints in the dust. Boot prints, fresh, leading deeper into the tomb. Our boot prints. We've been here before, man said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. We're walking in circles. No, Specialist Cowles said, studying his chrono. Time index shows we entered this passage 4 minutes ago. These prints are older, at least an hour. Look at the dust settlement pattern. Then someone else has been here. Someone with the same boots, same formation pattern, same... Man's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. No, that's not possible. But it was possible. In a structure that bent space, that reconfigured itself, that imprisoned screams for millennia. In such a place, time was just another variable to be manipulated. We were following our own footprints from a future we hadn't yet experienced, or a past we'd already lived and forgotten. The prints led to a chamber, large, cathedral-like, with pillars of black stone supporting a ceiling that disappeared into shadow. The walls here weren't carved with faces. They were smooth, mirror-polished, reflecting our images in obsidian clarity. And our reflections were wrong. I saw myself standing in formation with my squad, but in the reflection, I wore no rebreather. My face was exposed, gaunt, hollow-eyed, mouth stretched in a silent scream. And behind me, where the rest of the second squad should be, stood figures made of flayed meat and exposed bone, wearing human skin like ill-fitting suits. Don't look, I ordered, but it was too late. The men had seen what we would become, or what we already were, or what the tomb wanted us to know we always had been. Trooper man raised his laser gun, aiming at his own reflection. It's not real. It's not. His reflection moved first, pulled the trigger first, and man's chest exploded in a spray of las fire and blood, as if he'd shot himself from inside his own body. He collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. His reflection in the black stone remained standing, wearing that terrible expression of screaming silence, laser gun still raised. "Back!" I shouted. "Everyone back!" "Don't look at them." Too late. Specialist Cowell had turned to face the wall. His reflection showed him older, decades older, skin hanging in loose folds, eyes sunken deep. As we watched, his reflection aged further, 60 years, 70, 80, withering to a skeletal corpse wrapped in a rotting uniform, and Cowell aged with it. His skin tightened, then loosened. Hair went from brown to grey to white, falling out in clumps. His hands became skeletal claws, his face a skull with papery skin stretched across it. He tried to scream, but his throat had dried to leather. Only a rasp emerged. Then he collapsed into dust. Literally dusted his entire body, disintegrating into fine grey powder that spread across the black stone floor. His reflection remained, a corpse image standing eternal vigil in alien glass. "Close your eyes," Sergeant Voss commanded. "Everyone, close your—" The pillars moved, not the pillars themselves, the shadows around them. Shadows that had been cast by our lamps, that should have been a simple absence of light. They peeled away from their sources, standing upright, acquiring three-dimensionality, becoming solid. Shadow figures, perfect silhouettes of human forms, but wrong in subtle ways. Arms are too long, legs that bent at too many joints, faces that were smooth voids, yet somehow conveyed expressions of malice and hunger. They moved toward us with stuttering, jerking motions, like footage with frames missing. One moment at the pillar's base, next moment halfway across the chamber, next moment reaching for Trooper Vex's throat. Vex fired his laser gun point blank. The last bolt passed through the shadow without effect, struck the wall behind it, and ricocheted back. It hit Vex in the shoulder, spinning him around. He stumbled, and the shadow flowed over him like liquid night. He screamed. Emperor, how he screamed. The shadow poured into his mouth, his nose, his eyes, filling him with darkness. His skin went black, then grey, then translucent. I could see his skeleton through his flesh, see his organs shutting down one by one as the shadow consumed him from inside. When it finished, when it flowed away, Vex was still standing, but he was hollow. A skin suit filled with nothing, held upright by muscle memory alone. His eyes were empty sockets. His mouth hung open in a perpetual silent scream. Then he collapsed, and the skin that had been Trooper Vex lay on the ground like discarded clothing. "Fall back," I ordered, firing my laser gun at the nearest shadow. "Fighting retreat." "Incendiaries, if you have them." We fell back toward the chamber's far exit, firing as we went. Las bolts were useless, passing through the shadows without harm. But Specialist Roth, damaged Roth, burned Roth, he understood. He primed an incendiary grenade and hurled it into the center of the shadow mass. The explosion filled the chamber with white light. Real light. Bright enough to hurt. Bright enough to banish every shadow in the room. The shadow figures shrieked, not with sound, but with that same psychic pressure we'd felt from the crystal sphere. They recoiled from the light, flowing back toward the pillars, trying to hide behind the stone. But the incendiary burned for 15 seconds. 15 seconds of cleansing light that held the shadows at bay. 15 seconds to run. We ran through the far exit into another corridor. This one descended at a sharp angle, more ladder than passage, forcing us to climb down metal rungs set into the stone. The rungs were warm to the touch and covered in a fine layer of ash that might once have been organic. Down we climbed, down into the tomb's depths, where the air grew thick and hard to breathe, where the walls pressed in until we had to move single file, where the darkness was absolute except for our failing lamps. Down to where the excavation team had last transmitted, down to where 27 people had disappeared without a trace, down to where something was waiting. The ladder ended at a junction, 4 passages branching off in cardinal directions, each one identical to the others. No markings, no distinguishing features, just black stone and that ever-present sense of watching, of being studied by something vast and patient. Sergeant Voss checked his auspex out of habit, though we all knew it was useless. "Watchmaster, we need to make a choice. East, west, north, south. They all look the same." "Then we split up," I said, and immediately regretted it. Splitting up in a horror scenario was textbook stupidity, but we had no choice. We needed to find supplies, find a way out, find something that made sense in this impossible architecture. 2-man teams, stay in Vox contact. Any contact with hostiles, any signs of the excavation team, you report immediately. Understood. Understood. The Death Korps always understands. We understand duty, understand sacrifice, understand that sometimes the mission requires you to walk alone into darkness, knowing you won't return. I paired with Sergeant Voss. We took the northern passage. Troopers Baumann Hess took south. Specialist Roth and Corporal Graf took east. Private Wilhelm and Grenadier Holtz took west. 4 teams, 4 directions, 4 chances to find something useful before the tomb killed us all. The northern passage was different from the others. The walls here weren't smooth. They were textured, almost organic. Veins of that green bioluminescence spread through the stone like blood vessels through tissue. And the air smelled wrong, like copper and ozone and something else, something that reminded me of the mass graves on Krieg, where we'd buried hundreds of thousands after the bombardments. The smell of decay, of flesh returning to base elements. "Sir," Voss said quietly, "I need to tell you something before we go any further, in case we don't make it back." "Yes." He hesitated, then continued. "The whispers, the voices in the Vox. I've been hearing them even when the Vox is off. They're in my head now, inside my skull. They're telling me things about Krieg, about what we did, about the children we killed when we used the viral weapons." I stopped walking. "Voss, that's enemy action. The tomb is trying to break your discipline, trying to make me remember." He laughed, a hollow sound. "I don't need help remembering, sir. I remember every day, every child's face, every mother screaming as the virus melted her family. I remember because that's what we are, child killers who dress up our shame in duty and discipline. We saved our world. We murdered our world." His voice cracked. "We committed genocide against our own people because we couldn't accept surrender. And now we march across the galaxy, dying by the millions, pretending it's redemption. But it's not. It's just more killing, more death, more screaming that never stops." I grabbed him by the shoulders, forcing him to look at me. Behind his gas mask lenses, his eyes were wild, unfocused. "Sergeant, you are a Death Korps soldier. You swore an oath. Whatever guilt you carry, whatever pain, you carry it in service to the Emperor. That's what makes us different from the enemy. We turn our suffering into purpose." "But what if the Emperor is dead, sir? What if he's been dead for 10,000 years and we're just corpses marching in his name?" Heresy, pure, undiluted heresy. On any other world, In any other circumstance, I would have executed him immediately. But I couldn't. Because part of me, the part I kept buried under layers of discipline and duty, wondered if he was right. "The tomb is in your head," I said instead. "It's using your doubts against you. Don't let it win." He nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I'll try." We continued walking. The passage opened into a chamber. No, not a chamber. A gallery. A museum of horrors. The walls were lined with alcoves, and in each alcove stood a figure. Human figures, perfectly preserved, frozen in various states of agony. Some were partially flayed, skin hanging in strips from red meat. Others were crushed, bodies compacted into impossible shapes. Still others showed signs of burning, freezing, or slow dissection, and they were all still alive. I saw eyes tracking us as we passed, saw chests rising and falling in shallow breaths, saw lips moving in silent prayers or curses. The Necrons had preserved these people, excavation team members, by their uniforms, in the exact moment of their greatest suffering, kept them alive, kept them aware, for reasons I couldn't fathom. Entertainment, study, some alien purpose beyond human comprehension. One of the figures was Survey Leader Castellan. I recognized him from the personnel files. He hung suspended in his alcove, held in place by threads of living metal that pierced his flesh at dozens of points. His chest cavity was open, ribs spread, revealing his beating heart and working lungs. His eyes found mine, and I saw recognition, saw desperate hope, saw that hope die when he realized we couldn't help him. His lips moved. I couldn't hear him through the alcove's barrier, but I could read the words. "Kill me. Please. Kill me." I raised my laser gun, aimed at his head. My finger tightened on the trigger. Sergeant Voss grabbed my arm. "Sir, don't. It might be a trap. Might trigger something." "He's one of ours," I said. "We don't leave our people to suffer." "He's not our people anymore. He's part of the tomb now, part of the collection." He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew that death was a mercy we could still offer. That in this place of endless torment, a laser gun to the brain was an act of kindness. I pulled the trigger. The last bolt struck the alcove's barrier and dissipated harmlessly. The barrier wasn't glass or crystal. It was a force field of some kind, impervious to our weapons. Castellan's eyes closed. Whether in despair or relief, I couldn't tell. We moved on, counted 27 alcoves, 27 members of the excavation team, each one preserved in their personal hell. And at the far end of the gallery, still empty, were 23 more alcoves. One for each of us. They knew, Voss whispered. They knew exactly how many of us were coming. They prepared for us. I checked my chrono. We'd been in the tomb for 6 hours. It felt like 6 days, felt like 6 years. Time was slipping away, becoming meaningless in this place where past and future seemed to exist simultaneously. The Vox crackled to life. "Watchmaster, this is Baum. We've found something." The signal was breaking up, words cutting in and out. "Bodies, not bodies, wearing skin-like, please. They're wearing our..." Static. Then silence. "Baum, report," I transmitted. "South team, acknowledge." No response. Just the hiss of dead air. "East team, West team, report status." Static, distorted voices. Screaming that might have been laughter or might have been agony. Then clearly, in a voice that was definitely specialist wrath, but wrong somehow. Too wet. Too hollow. "They're here, Watchmaster." They've always been here, wearing our faces, wearing our flesh. They fit into us like we fit into our greatcoats, warm, comfortable, perfect fit. Wrath, fall back to the junction point. That's an order. Can't, sir. Don't have legs anymore. Don't need them. The stone holds me up. The stone holds all of us up, forever and ever, screaming forever and ever. The Vox died. We were alone, Sergeant Voss and I, standing in a gallery of the damned, with empty alcoves waiting to receive us. "What do we do, sir?" Voss asked. I looked at the northern passage's far exit, at the darkness beyond, at the depths we hadn't yet plumbed. "We go deeper," I said. "The only way out is through." "Through to what?" I didn't answer, because I knew what waited in the deepest parts of the tomb, what had been waiting for 60 million years, dreaming of flesh and suffering. The architects of this place, the masters of this horror, the Necrons themselves. Have you ever heard your own voice speaking words you never said? Have you listened to yourself confessing sins you never committed, screaming warnings you never meant to give? That's what the Vox corruption did. It took our voices, our identities, and turned them into weapons against us. Sergeant Voss and I moved through passage after passage, corridor after corridor. The tomb's architecture had become deliberately hostile, floors that tilted without warning, gravity that shifted direction mid-step, walls that pressed inward when we weren't watching. Navigation was impossible, chronology was meaningless. We simply moved forward because stopping meant accepting. We were trapped, and that acceptance would break whatever remained of our sanity. The Vox never stopped transmitting. Even with our personal units powered down, voices continued to echo through our helmets. Voices we recognized, voices of soldiers we'd lost, voices of brothers dead for years, killed on other worlds in other wars. Voices that knew things they shouldn't know. "Klaus," my Vox said in my own voice. "Klaus Reinhardt. That's your name, isn't it? You remember having a name. Remember being something other than a gas-masked tool of the corpsman." I ignored it. Names were weaknesses. I'd surrendered mine when I earned my greatcoat. "You had a brother," my voice continued, "before the virus bombs. He was 7. You were 9. You remember his name, don't you? You remember how he looked at you when the sirens started, how he asked if you'd protect him." "Shut up," I muttered. "You promised you'd protect him, but you couldn't. Nobody could. The virus got everyone. You watched him melt, watched his skin slough off like wet paper, watched him die knowing you'd lied." "Not real," I said through gritted teeth. "Memory corruption, psychic interference." "His name was Marcus," my voice whispered. "Say his name, Klaus. Say it before you forget. Say it before the stone makes you forget everything except screaming." Sergeant Voss grabbed my arm. "Sir, don't listen. It's trying to break you. Trying to." His Vox activated. His own voice spoke to him. "You're already broken, Voss. You broke when you pulled the trigger on the refugee convoy. Remember? They were fleeing the capital. Women, children, elderly, not combatants, just scared people trying to escape." Voss froze. That was orders, strategic necessity. They were consuming resources needed for the war effort. "They were civilians," Voss's voice replied, "and you killed them, mowed them down with heavy bolter fire until the road was a river of meat. You did it without hesitation, without mercy. Because that's what Krieg does. Krieg kills, Krieg exterminates, Krieg commits atrocities and calls it duty." "We had no choice," Voss said, but his voice wavered. "The survival of Krieg required." "Krieg was already dead," his voice shouted through the Vox. "Don't you understand? The planet died the moment we used the weapons. Everything after that was just corpses fighting over a grave, and you know it. You've always known it. That's why you welcome death. Why do you throw yourself at the enemy without hesitation? You're not seeking redemption, you're seeking punishment. Voss sank to his knees. His lasgun clattered to the stone floor. Behind his gas mask, I heard him sobbing deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. The Death Korps doesn't cry. We don't have the luxury of tears. We died on Krieg, and the dead don't mourn. But Sergeant Voss was crying. I knelt beside him, tried to pull him upright. "Sergeant, on your feet. We need to keep moving." "Why?" he asked. "What's the point? We're dead already. We died the moment we entered this place. The tomb showed us the truth. We're ghosts, corpses that don't know they're corpses. Maybe we've been dead for 500 years. Maybe Krieg was the tomb and this is just echoes." That's the corruption talking. That's what it wants you to think. Or maybe it's finally letting me think. Maybe this is the first honest thought I've had since I put on this mask. He reached up, fingers fumbling with his rebreather's seals. Maybe if I take it off, if I breathe the real air, I'll finally wake up. I grabbed his hands, held them away from the mask. "No, you keep it on. You keep breathing. You keep moving. That's an order, Sergeant. Since when do orders matter? Since when does anything matter? Since always. Orders matter because they're all we have. The structure that keeps us sane keeps us human. Without them, we're just animals, just meat waiting to become part of the walls." He looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time. "Is that what you think humanity is, sir? Following orders, being meat that makes choices about when to rot?" I think humanity is continuing forward when every instinct screams to give up. I think it's carrying your brothers even when you can barely carry yourself. I think, my Vox screamed. Not words, just sound, raw, unfiltered agony transmitted at maximum volume. The pressure hit like a physical blow, driving me to the ground. Blood ran from my nose, from my ears. My vision went white with pain. Through the screaming, I heard voices, hundreds of them, thousands, all the voices the tomb had collected, all the victims it had absorbed over millions of years. They spoke in unison. We are the tomb. We are the screaming. We are the silence that devours sound. We are every voice that ever cried out and was not heard. We are the memory of flesh. We are the future of bone. We are waiting in the walls. We are already inside you. We have always been inside you. There was never a time when we were not inside you. Scream with us. Scream forever. Scream until your throat becomes stone and your stone becomes scream. Then silence. Absolute, total silence. Not even the sound of our breathing registered. It was as if sound itself had been deleted from reality. I pulled myself upright. Voss was on his feet, moving his mouth, clearly speaking, but I heard nothing. I activated my Vox and saw the display showed active transmission, but no sound emerged. The tomb had stolen our voices. We'd become like the faces in the walls, screaming without sound, suffering without expression, the tomb's ultimate cruelty, taking away even the ability to voice our pain. I grabbed Voss and pointed down the passage. He nodded. We ran. The silence followed us. It wasn't absence. It was present. A physical thing that pressed against us, that tried to force its way into our mouths and ears and eyes. We ran through corridors that seemed to stretch like rubber, past walls where the carved faces were moving now, their mouths working in wordless screams that matched our own. We emerged into a vast chamber, cathedral-sized, with a ceiling lost in darkness and a floor that descended in terraced levels like an amphitheater. At the bottom, perhaps 100 meters down, was a structure, a machine, a device of such complexity that looking at it directly caused geometric pain, angles that intersected impossibly, surfaces that existed in more dimensions than 3, and surrounding the machine were bodies, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Human bodies, Xenos bodies, bodies of creatures I couldn't identify. All of them posed in expressions of agony, mouths open, faces twisted. All of them are perfectly preserved. All of them are still aware, still suffering, still screaming into the silence. This was the source, the heart of the tomb, the engine that powered the horror, a psychic amplifier, a device designed to capture suffering and broadcast it across the warp, feeding some unknowable purpose. The Necrons had built this place as a weapon, not against armies, but against the fundamental forces of reality itself. They were harvesting agony the way others harvested promethium, using it as fuel for their immortal machines, and we had walked directly into the collection chamber. Movement on the terraced levels, figures emerging from alcoves we hadn't noticed. They moved with jerking, stuttering motions, too fast in some moments, too slow in others, as if their relationship with time was negotiable. Necron warriors, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Their skeletal forms were crafted from living metal, eye sockets burning with eldritch green fire. Each one carried a weapon, Gauss flares that could strip flesh from bone at the molecular level. They didn't attack, they just watched, waiting. Then, from the depths near the machine, something else emerged. It was taller than the warriors, more ornate. Its metal body was decorated with carvings similar to those on the tomb walls, faces frozen in screams, figures in torment. It wore a cloak made of something that might have been fabric once but had been transmuted into metallic threads that moved like living things. A Necron cryptek, a master of their strange technologies, a creature millions of years old, possessed of knowledge that made human science look like children playing with sticks. It raised one skeletal hand, and my vox activated. Humans, it said, its voice a synthesized rasp that bypassed my missing hearing entirely, transmitting directly into my brain. Mammals, meat things, you have entered the tomb of silent screams. This pleases us. New voices for the collection, new variations of agony to study. I tried to speak, tried to demand answers, explanations, any information that might help us survive, but I had no voice. I could only mouth words in silence. The cryptek tilted its head, studying me with alien curiosity. Your voices are forfeit. Your screams belong to the tomb now. You will join the others. You will scream for us forever, in perfect silence, feeding the machine. Your suffering will power our great work, the silencing of the warp itself, the elimination of chaos through the elimination of sound. It gestured, and the Necron warriors began to advance, slowly, deliberately, herding us toward the terraces, toward the waiting alcoves where we would be preserved in eternal torment. Sergeant Voss raised his laser gun and fired. The last bolt struck a warrior in its chest, leaving a smoking crater in the living metal. For a moment I thought we'd found a weakness, then the crater filled with liquid metal, flowing back into place, repairing the damage instantly. The warrior didn't even slow. We were out of choice, out of hope, out of everything except the Death Korps' final gift, the ability to choose how we died. I pulled a crack grenade from my belt, held it up so Voss could see. He understood immediately. We'd die fighting. We'd die taking as many of these metal horrors with us as possible. We'd die as Kriegers, defiant, disciplined, dutiful to the very end. I primed the grenade, prepared to throw it at the cryptek, at the machine, at anything that might disrupt this nightmare. Then the walls exploded. The explosion wasn't external. It came from within the walls themselves. The stone burst outward in chunks and fragments, and from the openings poured things. They had been human once. The shapes were fundamentally recognizable, bipedal, and roughly the right proportions. But they'd been changed, transformed, flayed. Their skin hung in strips, not removed but loosened, so it draped around them like obscene robes. Beneath the skin, I could see muscle tissue, but wrong, organized incorrectly, fibers running in impossible directions. And beneath the muscle, visible through gaps and tears, was metal. Necron living metal, integrated into what remained of human physiology. These were the missing members of the excavation team, the ones who'd gone into the walls. They'd been absorbed, transformed, turned into hybrid horrors that were neither human nor Necron, but something worse than either. They came at us with horrible speed, crawling on all fours, leaping from wall to wall, their loose skin flapping and trailing behind them. Their faces, Emperor's mercy. Their faces. The skin had been peeled back but kept attached, so it hung like masks that slipped and shifted, revealing the metal skulls beneath. And they were trying to speak. Their mouths moved, tongues lolling, trying to form words they could no longer produce. Silent screams, silent pleas, silent warnings. The Necron warriors turned to face this new threat, Gauss flayers raising. But the hybrid things were fast, impossibly fast. They were on the warriors before they could fire, tearing at them with clawed hands that sparked against living metal. The battle was silent, utterly silent. Gauss weapons fired without sound, stripping flesh and metal away in spiraling streams of disintegrating matter. The hybrid things shrieked without sound as they were unmade at the molecular level. Warriors fell without clanging, their bodies collapsing into component parts that skittered across the stone floor. And through it all, I heard my heart beating. I felt my blood pumping, but it made no sound. Sergeant Voss grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a gap in the wall where one of the hybrid things had emerged. An escape route, a chance. We ran for it. Ran while the battle raged around us, while horror fought horror in silent fury. We squeezed through the gap and found ourselves in a passage we hadn't seen before. Narrow, barely wide enough for our shoulders. The walls here were different, not smooth black stone, but rough, organic looking, almost like being inside a throat. Behind us, the sounds of battle faded. Not because it was ending, but because sound itself was ending. The silence was spreading, consuming everything. We crawled forward. The passage twisted, turned and branched. We took turns at random, having no navigation, no plan, only the desperate animal need to put distance between ourselves and the horror behind us. Eventually, the passage widened. We emerged into a smaller chamber, maybe 10 meters across, with a low ceiling. And in the chamber were bodies, human bodies, fresh, members of my regiment. Trooper Baum lay against the wall, his greatcoat torn open, his chest cavity exposed. His organs were arranged outside his body in neat, precise patterns, a deliberate dissection, methodical and thorough. His eyes were open, tracking us as we entered. He was still alive, still aware. His mouth moved in silent pleading. Trooper Hess sat in the chamber's center, surrounded by his own skin. It had been removed in one piece, like a suit, and laid out carefully around him. His skinless body glistened red in the chamber's dim bioluminescence. He was trying to put the skin back on, pressing pieces against his raw flesh, as if he could somehow become whole again. And in the far corner something moved. It was shaped like Specialist Roth. It wore Roth's uniform, bore his identification tags. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long. The head sat at an angle that should have broken the neck. And when it turned to face us, I saw that its face was a mask. Literally a mask made from Roth's face, worn over something else. Something metal and ancient and cruel. It spoke, and somehow, despite the silence, I heard it in my bones. New skins, fresh skins. They fit better when they're still warm, when the meat is still soft, when the screaming is still fresh. It lurched toward us with that same stuttering motion the Necron warriors had displayed. But worse, because it was wearing a human face, wearing Roth's face, and beneath the mask, I caught glimpses of green fire burning in empty eye sockets. This wasn't a hybrid. This was a Necron wearing human skin, playing at being human the way a child plays with a doll, a flayed one. Sergeant Voss fired his laser gun. The last bolt hit the thing's center mass, burning through Roth's uniform, searing into the stolen skin. The flayed one didn't react. It just kept coming, reaching with hands that ended in metal talons, sharp enough to part flesh like water. I threw my crack grenade. The explosion was silent but visceral. The flayed one was blown backward, skin and meat flying in all directions. For a moment, I thought we'd destroyed it. Then it reassembled. The scattered fragments of metal pulled back together like magnetized filings. The living metal reformed, reconstituted, became whole again. The skin was gone, burned away in the blast, revealing the skeletal machine beneath. But it didn't seem to care. It just began looking around the chamber, studying the bodies, selecting new skin to wear. It chose Trooper Baum. Baum was still alive, still aware. He tried to struggle as the flayed one crouched over him, tried to fight as skeletal hands began peeling what remained of his skin free from his body, tried to scream as he was flayed alive, his skin carefully removed in strips and patches, his nerve endings exposed to air and agony. The flayed one wore his skin like a prize, draped it over its metal frame, adjusting and smoothing it into place. And it looked at us with Baum's dead eyes and smiled with Baum's dead mouth. Then it spoke in Baum's voice, or a mockery of it, filtered through alien cognition. How do I look? Is the fit good? Does the meat sit right? I want to wear it well. I want to wear it forever. More movement behind us. The passage we'd come through was filling with shapes. More flayed ones, drawn by the activity, by the promise of fresh skin. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all wearing scraps and pieces of human flesh, all decorated in the remains of their victims. This was their nest, their hunting ground. We'd stumbled into the heart of their territory. Sergeant Voss pressed his back against mine. We stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded, with nowhere to run. His hand found mine, squeezed once. Not comfort, not farewell, just acknowledgement. We'd fought together. Now we'd die together. The flayed ones closed in. I raised my laser gun, knowing it was useless, knowing we were already dead, knowing that in moments our skin would join the collection, our faces would decorate these metal horrors, our screams would feed the tomb forever. Then the floor collapsed beneath us. We fell through darkness, through layers of tomb architecture that shouldn't exist in the same space, fell past chambers and corridors and vast empty spaces where things with too many eyes watched our descent, fell for what felt like minutes but might have been seconds or hours. Time had no meaning here. We hit hard, stone floor, unyielding, impact that should have shattered bones. But the stone gave slightly, absorbed the force in a way that was organic, deliberate. The tomb didn't want us dead. It wanted us to be intact, wanted us whole enough to suffer properly. I lay there, stunned, pain radiating through my body. Beside me, Sergeant Voss groaned, still alive, still conscious. Small mercies in this place of infinite cruelty. We'd fallen into a chamber unlike any we'd seen before, massive, cathedral vast, with walls that curved up and inward, forming a dome overhead. The walls were transparent, or rather they showed things, images, scenes, memories. I saw battles from wars fought before humanity existed, saw worlds burning, saw populations screaming as their flesh was stripped away by invisible forces, saw the Necron tier, the original species, before they became machines, kneeling before their gods, begging for immortality, not understanding what they would lose in the transformation. saw the moment of conversion, saw millions of living beings fed into machines that stripped away their souls and transferred their consciousness into metal bodies, saw the screams, Emperor's mercy, the screams, billions of voices crying out as their spirits were burned away, leaving only cold calculation and eternal hunger. And I understood. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a memorial, a monument to what the Necrons had lost. They'd traded life for immortality and discovered too late that immortality without sensation, without emotion, without the ability to feel, was just another form of death. So they collected what they'd lost, harvested it from other species, built tombs like this one to store and preserve the one thing they could never regain, the capacity to suffer, to truly feel anything at all. A voice echoed through the chamber, not through vox, not through sound. It simply manifested directly in consciousness, bypassing all physical senses. You begin to comprehend. Good. Understanding enriches suffering, makes the screaming more pure. I struggled to my feet, helping Voss upright. In the center of the chamber stood a figure, not a warrior, not a flayed one, something else entirely. It was humanoid in the loosest sense, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs that bent at joints that shouldn't exist. Its body was covered in robes that seemed to be woven from shadow itself, constantly shifting and moving. And its face, if it could be called a face, was a smooth mask of living metal with no features except 2 burning points of green light where eyes should be. A cryptek, but not the one from the amphitheater. This one radiated power, age, malevolence. It felt like standing before a god, a cruel, ancient, utterly inhuman god. I am Cryptek Sharek the Silent, the voice said, architect of this tomb, keeper of the screaming. I have tended this collection for 63 million years. I have harvested agony from 10,000 species across 10,000 worlds. And now, you add your voices to my choir. Behind the cryptek, I could see it now. The source of the images on the walls. A machine. No, the machine. The heart of the entire tomb complex. It was massive, filling the chamber's center, rising through layers of reality I couldn't properly perceive. The device was constructed from materials that hurt to look at, substances that shouldn't exist, geometries that violated physical laws, and embedded throughout its structure, integrated into its very fabric, were faces. Human faces, Xenos faces, faces from species long extinct, millions of them, maybe billions, all screaming, all trapped within the machine's crystalline matrix, all feeding it with their eternal suffering. The warp hungers, Sarek said. It feeds on emotion, on passion, on the raw psychic energy of living minds. But we who are Necron have no souls. We were severed from the warp in our transformation. We cannot be touched by its influence, cannot be corrupted by its whispers. The cryptek moved closer, studying us with those burning green eyes. But we can harness it. We can take the suffering of those who still possess souls and use it as a weapon. This tomb is but one of thousands. Together they form a network, a web of silent screams that spans the galaxy, feeding, growing, preparing. Preparing for what? I tried to ask, but no sound emerged. My voice was still gone. Sharek understood anyway. Preparing to silence the warp itself, to drown the chaos gods in such a tide of negative psychic energy that they collapse under their own weight, to end the great enemy by using the very thing they feed upon against them, suffering so purely, so concentrated, so absolutely, that it becomes poison rather than sustenance. The machine pulsed with light, green and sickly, spreading through its crystalline structure like an infection, and with each pulse, I felt something. Pressure, not physical but psychic. The screams of billions of trapped souls pushing against my mind, trying to break through, trying to make me understand the depths of their torment. "You feel them," Zarek said. "All who have entered this tomb, all who have fed the machine. They are not dead. Death would be mercy. They are preserved in the exact moment of their greatest agony, experiencing it forever, an eternal instant of perfect suffering." Voss collapsed to his knees beside me. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. The psychic pressure was too much. He was breaking. I grabbed him, tried to hold him upright. But I was breaking too. We all were. The machine was designed to harvest suffering, and it was very, very good at its job. "You wonder if there is escape," Zarek continued. "There is not. The tomb is sealed. Your ships in orbit received no distress signals. We ensured that. Your superiors believe this is a routine investigation. They will wait the standard 30 days before declaring you lost. By then, you will be fully integrated into the machine. Your screams will be pure. Your agony will be perfect." Through my failing vision, I saw movement in the chamber's periphery. More Necron constructs are emerging from hidden alcoves, not warriors or flayed ones, but something worse. They were built like spiders, multi-legged, skittering across walls and ceiling with horrible speed. Each one carried tools, medical tools, flensing knives, bone saws, devices whose purpose I couldn't identify but whose function I could guess with terrible clarity. They were going to take us apart, slowly, methodically, while keeping us alive and aware, while feeding our suffering into the machine. "Your species calls us monsters," Zarek said. "You are correct. But we are monsters you created. We were driven to this transformation by the old ones, your ancestors in a way. They refused us the immortality we craved, and so we took it by other means. And now, 60 million years later, we harvest what the old ones left behind. We collect your legacy of flesh and pain and use it to fuel our resurrection." The spider constructs closed in. Their tools gleamed in the green light. I could see dried blood on the blades, not fresh blood, but blood from victims harvested millennia ago. The Necrons were nothing, if not efficient. They didn't waste resources replacing tools. Sergeant Voss looked at me. Behind his gas mask, his eyes were clear, lucid, accepting. We'd both known from the moment we entered the tomb that we weren't leaving. The Death Korps doesn't expect survival. We expect only to die well, to make our deaths mean something. But what meaning could there be in this? In being tortured for eternity? In becoming fuel for an alien machine? In screaming silently while the galaxy continued, unaware and uncaring? I thought of Krieg, of my home world, poisoned, irradiated, transformed into a hell because we couldn't accept surrender. We'd turned our planet into a tomb because we believed death with honor was better than life with shame. And now, in this alien tomb, surrounded by the harvest of 60 million years of suffering, I finally understood the truth. There is no honor in death. There is only death. And sometimes, death is the beginning of something far worse. The spider constructs reached for us with their surgical instruments. Then, impossibly, I heard a voice. Not transmitted, not psychic. Actual sound, cutting through the tomb's imposed silence like a knife through cloth. "Kriegers, on your feet. The Emperor protects." I turned. Through the chamber's far entrance came figures, human figures. Kriegers in weathered greatcoats, gas masks reflecting the green light. But they were different. Wrong. Their movements were too smooth. Their uniforms were too clean. And their voices, when they shouted their battle cries, echoed strangely, as if coming from very far away or very long ago. They opened fire, laser guns blazing, las bolts striking the spider constructs, the Necron warriors that had begun emerging from the walls. And their shots were effective. The constructs shattered. The warriors fell, living metal unable to regenerate fast enough to repair the damage. Reinhardt, the lead figure, called my name. Voss, get to the machine, destroy it. I knew that voice. Knew it despite having never heard it before. It was the voice from the Vox corruption. My own voice, but older, wearier. The voice of someone who'd been through this before, who'd lived this moment already and was now reaching back through time to change it. Or the tomb was playing its final trick, offering false hope before the end. Either way, we had no other option. Voss and I ran for the machine while the Phantom Kriegers fought the Necron defenders. Ran through a battlefield where past and future collided, where the dead fought the deathless, where impossible things happened as casually as breathing. Up close, the machine was even more horrible. The faces embedded in its structure weren't just images, they were actual faces, somehow preserved within the crystalline matrix. I could see them breathing, see their eyes moving, see their mouths forming silent words. Help us. Kill us. End it. Please. Mercy. Emperor. Mercy. Voss pulled his remaining charges, demo packs we'd carried for breaching fortifications. He began placing them at the machine's base, at the joints and seams where different sections connected. His hands shook, but his training held. Even here, even now, the Death Korps' discipline is maintained. I provided cover, firing at any Necron construct that came too close. The Phantom Kriegers were holding the line, but they were fading, becoming translucent. Whatever force had brought them here, time manipulation, psychic projection, or the tomb's own reality warping effects, it was weakening. Charges set, Voss reported. 30 seconds. We ran back the way we'd come, toward the chamber's exit. Behind us, the battle raged. The Phantom Kriegers made their stand, dying again to buy us seconds. I saw them fall one by one, saw them fade from existence like morning mist. The last one, the one with my voice, turned to look at me as we passed. Our eyes met across the chamber, and I saw in his gaze not hope, but resignation. He knew how this ended, had lived through it before, was living through it again, trapped in some temporal loop, the tomb used to torture its victims. Good luck, he said, for whatever it's worth. Then we were through the exit, into another passage, running as hard as our exhausted bodies could manage. The explosion, when it came, was soundless but total. The shockwave hit like a physical wall, throwing us forward, slamming us into stone. The passage trembled. Cracks spread through the walls. Chunks of ceiling fell, crushing, blocking, sealing. And from behind us, from the chamber we'd just left, came a sound. Not silence, not pressure, not psychic force. Actual sound. Real, physical, audible sound. Screaming. Billions of voices, freed from the machine's prison, all crying out at once. The accumulated suffering of 60 million years, released in a single instant. It was the most beautiful and most terrible sound I'd ever heard. The tomb's power failed. Emergency lighting died. The green bioluminescence faded. The whispers in the Vox went silent. For the first time since we'd entered this nightmare, we were surrounded by natural darkness, normal darkness, the kind that existed without malice or intent. We lay in that darkness, bleeding, broken, but alive. The mission was complete. The tomb was damaged. The machine was destroyed. But we were still trapped, still miles underground, still in the heart of a Necron structure that, while wounded, was far from dead. And somewhere in that darkness, something was moving. The darkness after the explosion was different from the darkness before. Before, it had been oppressive, malevolent, full of watching presence. Now it was just dark, empty, the way darkness is supposed to be. But empty darkness in a Necron tomb is somehow worse, because you know it won't stay empty. Voss and I lay in the rubble-choked passage, taking inventory of our situation. His assessment was grim. 2 laser guns with maybe 30 shots combined. 1 frag grenade, 1 combat knife, no food, no water, no functioning Vox, no way to navigate, no extraction point. And we're still alive, I added. That's something. Is it? He laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. Maybe Roth was right. Maybe we died when we entered. Maybe we're just ghosts acting out the last moments before we realize we're dead. I grabbed his shoulder, shook him. Voss, listen to me. We're alive because we're too stubborn to die. That's what being Krieg means. We outlast everything. Enemies, odds, hope. We endure. So we're going to endure this. He nodded slowly. Yes, Watchmaster. What are your orders? We move. Pick a direction. Keep moving until we find a way out, or until something kills us. Simple plan. Best kind.
We stood, collecting our weapons, adjusting our rebreathers. My chronometer had stopped, shattered in the explosion or disrupted by the tomb's temporal effects. No way to know how long we'd been down here. Felt like days. It might have been hours or weeks.
We chose a direction at random, which I thought was east, though in this labyrinth, cardinal directions were meaningless, and began walking. The passage was tight, forcing us to move single file. Debris crunched beneath our boots. The air was thick with dust that our rebreathers struggled to filter. After what might have been an hour, we found blood. Not fresh blood. Old blood. Dried blood. Months old, maybe years. A trail of it leading down the passage, as if someone had been dragged, or had dragged themselves, wounded and desperate, leaving a breadcrumb trail for rescuers who would never come. We followed the blood trail because we had no better option. It led us through twisting passages, down shallow ramps, past chambers filled with debris and abandoned equipment. This was an older section of the tomb, less maintained, less pristine. Sections of the wall had collapsed, ceilings sagged under their own weight. The blood trail ended at a door, heavy, reinforced, human-made. Imperial issue, with Mechanicus markings and a number stenciled in High Gothic. Survey Post 7. The excavation team had made it this far, had found or built a shelter, and something had found them here. The door was sealed but unlocked. We pushed it open slowly, weapons raised. Inside was a single large room. Survey equipment lined the walls, Auspex stations, Vox relays, data cogitators. All of it is inactive, covered in dust. And in the center of the room, arranged in a perfect circle, there were bodies. 12 of them. 11 members of the excavation team. I recognized their uniforms, and 1 Necron warrior. All of them kneeling, hands clasped behind their backs as if in prayer or surrender. All of them with their throats slit in single, precise cuts. All of them were perfectly preserved, no decay, no blood on the floor despite the catastrophic wounds. The cuts were centuries old. The bodies were hours old. Both statements were somehow simultaneously true. Throne, Voss whispered. What happened here? I examined the bodies more closely. The excavation team members showed signs of other wounds, laser burns, puncture wounds, and lacerations. They'd fought before dying, but the throat cuts had been post-mortem. Someone had killed them, then arranged them like this, made them kneel, made them presentable. The Necron warrior was different. Its living metal body showed no damage except the throat cut, a precise bisection of its mechanical neck, separating head from body. But Necrons don't have throats to cut, don't have blood to spill. So why the ritualistic wound? It's a message, I said. Or a trophy. Or both. Someone killed these people and the warrior, then posed them, made art from murder. But who? The Necrons don't do this. They don't pose bodies. They harvest them, study them, torture them, but they don't arrange them like... Voss trailed off, understanding dawning in his eyes. Unless they're learning, imitating, trying to understand human ritual by mimicking it. The flayed ones. They wore skin to understand flesh. Maybe they also copied human behaviors to understand consciousness. Death rituals, funeral arrangements, the way we treat our dead. They were learning to be human by practicing on corpses. A sound behind us, subtle, almost imperceptible, the whisper of metal on stone. We spun, weapons raised. Nothing there, just the doorway, the passage beyond, the darkness. But the sound came again, from above. I looked up. The ceiling was covered in them, flayed ones, dozens of them, hanging upside down from the stone like grotesque bats, their stolen skin hanging in ragged strips, their metal bodies gleaming in the dim light from our lamps. All of them were watching us with burning green eyes, all of them perfectly still, perfectly silent. How long had they been there? Had they been watching us examine the bodies? Had they been waiting for us to understand their artwork before revealing themselves? Voss, I said quietly, on my mark, we run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just. The flayed ones dropped. They fell from the ceiling in a wave of metal and meat, landing with impossible grace around the circle of bodies. They didn't attack. They just stood there, surrounding us, studying us with alien curiosity. Then one of them stepped forward. It wore skin I recognized. Trooper Hess's skin, the soldier from 2nd Squad. It had been preserved, carefully maintained. The flayed one had taken good care of its prize. It reached up with skeletal fingers and peeled back Hess's face like a mask, revealing the metal skull beneath. Green fire burned in its eye sockets, its jaw unhinged, opening far wider than any human mouth, and from that impossible maw came sounds. Not words, not exactly, but vocalizations that were trying to be words, mimicry of human speech, filtered through alien comprehension. Kneel. Like. These. Kneel. Pretty. Kneel. Right. Make. Article. Together. You. Kneel. We. Cut. Make. Pretty. Make. Still. Make. Part. Collection. It wanted us to join the circle, to kneel like the others, to present our throats for the cutting, to become part of its tableau. No, I said. The flayed one tilted its head, processing this response. No. Number. Not. Word. We. No. Only. Yes. Only. Submit only. Become still. It lunged. I fired my laser gun point blank. The last bolt punched through Hess's stolen skin, through the metal body beneath, exiting out the back. The flayed one staggered but didn't fall. The wound began closing immediately, living metal flowing like liquid to repair the damage. But we'd already moved. Voss threw his frag grenade into the center of the circle of bodies. We dove through the doorway as the explosion filled the room with fire and shrapnel. The blast wouldn't kill the flayed ones. They were too durable, too alien. But it would disorient them, give us seconds to run. We ran through passages that seemed to shift and change around us, ran past chambers we'd seen before, or ones that looked identical, or ones that couldn't possibly exist in the same structure. The tomb was still active, still reconfiguring, though its power was diminished after the machine's destruction. Behind us, we heard them coming. Not running. Flayed ones don't run, they teleport. Phase through space, appearing ahead of their own movement, manifesting in impossible locations. One appeared directly in front of me. I shot it in the face. It disappeared, reappearing behind Voss. He spun and fired, and it vanished again, reappearing on the ceiling, on the walls, everywhere and nowhere. We couldn't fight them, couldn't outrun them, couldn't hide from something that could phase through solid matter, but we could improvise. Voss, the support pillars. He understood immediately. We were in a section of the tomb that showed structural damage, cracks in the walls, sagging ceiling. The explosion had weakened it. A few well-placed shots could bring the whole section down. We fired at the pillars while running, las bolts burning into stone, weakening already compromised supports. The ceiling groaned. Dust rained down. Cracks spread like spiderwebs through the stone overhead. The flayed ones kept coming, phasing in and out of reality, reaching for us with skinless fingers that left trails of stolen blood in the air. The ceiling collapsed. Tons of black stone fell in a thunderous cascade. The flayed ones were buried, crushed, trapped beneath debris. We were at the edge of the collapse, hit by the shock wave but not the main fall. We tumbled forward, sliding down a newly created slope of rubble into darkness below. We landed hard, rolled, came to rest in a pile of dust and broken stone. When I opened my eyes, we were in a different section entirely, a natural cavern, not tomb architecture. The moon's original stone, predating the Necron structure, and in the distance I could see light, not green bioluminescence, not the tomb's sickly glow, natural light, sunlight filtering down through cracks in the surface kilometers above. A way out. We pulled ourselves upright and stumbled toward the light, every muscle screaming, every breath labored. Behind us, beneath tons of collapsed stone, I could hear sounds, scraping, digging. The flayed ones are burrowing through solid rock to reach us. They would never stop, never give up. They had eternity to hunt us. They were patient in ways living things could never comprehend, but we had something they didn't. The desperate urgency of the dying. The knowledge that we had only minutes, maybe seconds, before our bodies gave out entirely. We reached the source of the light, a shaft, a natural formation leading up, too narrow to climb easily, but wide enough to squeeze through. Handholds carved into the rock face, whether by erosion or ancient purpose. We climbed, hand over hand, inch by inch, pulling ourselves up toward the light. My hands were bleeding, fingers raw and torn. Voss was in worse shape. His injured hand from the burn could barely grip, but we climbed. Below us, the flayed ones emerged from the rubble, looked up, began climbing too, moving with that same unnatural, stuttering speed. We climbed faster, desperation lending strength to exhausted limbs. The light grew brighter, the air grew warmer. We could feel the wind from above, thin but real, carrying the scent of open space and freedom. 50 meters from the surface, my handhold crumbled. I slipped, caught myself on a lower outcropping, and felt my ribs crack with the impact. Voss grabbed my arm, hauled me up, and we kept climbing. 20 meters. The flayed ones were gaining. I could hear their claws scraping stone, could feel them directly below us. 10 meters. Light so bright it hurt. Wind so strong it threatened to tear us loose. 5 meters. A skeletal hand grabbed my boot. I kicked, felt metal fingers lose their grip, kicked again, and the hand fell away. But others were coming. The shaft was filling with them, a vertical tunnel packed with metal horrors, all climbing toward the same goal. We broke through the surface into blinding daylight. The moon's barren surface stretched in all directions. Grey regolith, impact craters, distant rock formations. And there, 500 meters away, our landing craft, still intact, still waiting. We ran, or rather stumbled. Our bodies were breaking down, running on nothing but will. Behind us, the flayed ones emerged from the shaft like insects from a hive. They poured onto the surface, dozens of them, hundreds, all wearing their stolen skins, all reaching toward us with insatiable hunger. 300 meters to the ship, 200, 100. The boarding ramp was down. We'd left it unsealed, standard Krieg protocol, always ready for rapid extraction. We ran up the ramp, slapped the control to close it, and dove for the pilot's controls. The engines were cold. It would take 30 seconds to achieve ignition. 30 seconds we didn't have. The flayed ones hit the hull like a wave. We could hear them outside, clawing, tearing, trying to peel the ship open like fruit. Metal screamed under the assault. Viewports cracked. 20 seconds. The hull buckled. Claws punched through, grasping, searching. 10 seconds. A flayed one tore open the boarding ramp, began climbing inside. 5 seconds. Ignition. I slammed the thrust controls forward. The ship lurched upward, engines roaring, tearing free from the moon's weak gravity. The flayed ones fell away, tumbling back to the surface, their hunt ended by simple physics. We climbed. Up through the thin atmosphere, up into the void, up toward the waiting fleet in orbit. And only when Salvar's moon was a grey dot behind us did I allow myself to believe we might actually survive. We didn't survive. I mean, we were alive, breathing, conscious, functional. But we didn't survive. Not really. Because the tomb had marked us, changed us, made us part of its collection even as we escaped its physical confines. The extraction ship's medical bay was automated, standard Krieg deployment, minimal resources for minimal personnel. We treated our wounds as best we could, synthetic skin for lacerations, bone knit for fractures, stimulants for exhaustion. Bandaged the physical damage while ignoring the psychological trauma that no amount of medicine could address. We were 3 days from the nearest Imperial outpost. 3 days of floating through the void in a ship that suddenly felt far too large, far too empty. Just Voss and I, alone with our thoughts and our memories. On the second day, Voss started screaming. Not loudly, not dramatically, just screaming. Continuous, mechanical. His mouth open in a rictus of agony, no variation in pitch or volume. Like he'd been locked in a single moment of pain and was expressing it endlessly. I tried to calm him, to snap him out of it, but his eyes were unfocused, staring at something I couldn't see. And when I checked his vital signs, everything was normal. Heart rate, blood pressure, and brain activity, all within expected parameters. The screaming continued for 6 hours, then stopped abruptly, and Voss collapsed into sleep so deep I thought he'd died. When he woke up, he didn't remember it. On the third day, I saw them, flayed ones, standing in the corners of the ship, hanging from the ceiling, pressed against the viewports. All of them were watching me with those burning green eyes. All of them were wearing faces I recognized. Roth, Baum, Hess, the excavation team, even Voss. They weren't real. I knew they weren't real. The ship's sensors showed nothing, but I could see them anyway, could watch them mouth silent words, could feel their hunger radiating like cold fire. The tomb hadn't let us go. It had just changed the nature of our imprisonment. We reached the outpost, a minor refueling station orbiting a gas giant on the fringe of Imperial space. 500 personnel, mostly support crew and Mechanicus tech adepts. They welcomed us, processed our arrival, and began the standard debriefing protocols. I filed my report, detailed everything. The excavation team's fate, the tomb's nature, the psychic weapon at its heart, the destruction we'd caused. Recommended the moon be designated exterminatus, the entire system quarantined, no exceptions. The station commander, a bored-looking Navy officer named Thrace, read my report with obvious skepticism. "You're claiming," he said slowly, "that you encountered a Necron tomb world with active defenses, that you destroyed a Xenos weapon of mass destruction, that you escaped from creatures that can phase through solid matter, and that you did all this with only 2 survivors from an initial force of 50. Yes, sir. Watchmaster, I've been stationed on this rock for 12 years. I've processed 10,000 reports from 10,000 skirmishes, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that nobody escapes from an active Necron tomb. Not Kriegers, not Space Marines, not the Emperor himself. With respect, sir, we did. Or," he leaned forward, "you encountered something else. Atmospheric anomalies causing hallucinations, structural collapse triggering panic, mass psychosis induced by isolation. The mind plays tricks in confined spaces. Soldiers see things that aren't there. Sir, the excavation team disappeared. Yes, unfortunate, but disappearance doesn't confirm Xenos involvement. Could be cave-ins, equipment failure, any number of mundane explanations." He closed my report with a decisive snap. "I'm marking this as investigation required. The administratum will send a proper survey team in 6 months. If there's really a Necron tomb down there, they'll confirm it. Until then, you and Sergeant Voss are confined to this station. Standard quarantine protocols for personnel exposed to potentially infectious environments." "Confined? Sir, we need to warn. You need to rest, Watchmaster. You've been through an ordeal. Real or imagined, it's affected you. Take the time, recover. Let the proper authorities handle this." He dismissed us. Voss and I were assigned quarters in the station's lower decks, small rooms, barely large enough for a bunk and personal storage. Claustrophobic after the vast emptiness of the tomb, but at least it was human-scale architecture. Right angles, normal gravity, air that didn't taste of dust and death. But the visions continued. Every reflective surface showed me the tomb. Every shadow looked like a flayed one. I could hear the whispers through the bulkheads, thousands of voices speaking simultaneously, forming a tide of sound that wasn't quite sound. Voss was experiencing it too. I could tell by the way his eyes tracked movement that wasn't there, by the way he flinched at sudden noises only he could hear. We didn't talk about it. The Death Korps doesn't acknowledge weakness. We endured. On the 5th day at the station, the murders started. Tech Adept Hollis, found in the maintenance tunnels with his throat cut. Single precise wound, no blood on the floor, body posed in a kneeling position. Exactly like the excavation team. Navigator Krell discovered in her quarters. Same wound, same positioning, same bloodless death. 3 more over the next week, always the throat, always kneeling, always dry despite catastrophic bleeding that should have painted the walls. The station commander called it a serial killer, launched an investigation, increased security, locked down all non-essential personnel. But I knew what it was. The tomb hadn't just marked us, it had followed us. Something had come through with us, hiding in the shadows of our ship, spreading to the station when we docked. An infection, a haunting. A piece of the tomb's nightmare is taking root in the real world. On the 9th day, Sergeant Voss disappeared. I found his room empty, the door sealed from the inside. No signs of struggle, no blood. Just his personal effects arranged neatly on the bunk, and a message scratched into the metal wall with what looked like a combat knife. I can hear them all the time now. every voice the tomb collected. Billions of screams inside my head. I can't make it stop. Going to make it stop. Going down, going back. Have to make it stop. Down meant the lower decks, maintenance tunnels, support systems. Places are dark and confined, far from human activity. Places perfect for hiding. I gathered my laser gun and went hunting. The maintenance tunnels were a labyrinth, narrow passages lined with pipes and conduits, lit by flickering emergency lumens that cast everything in stark shadows. The air was thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and machine oil. And beneath it all, something else. Something organic and wrong. I found the first body 50 meters in. Station Security Officer Chen, throat cut, kneeling, positioned with the same ritual precision as all the others. But this one was fresh. Blood still wet on the deck plating. Running in thin rivulets toward the drainage grates. Running, but not pooling. As I watched, the blood began to evaporate, turning to red mist that dissipated into nothing. Within minutes, the wound would be dry. The body would look centuries old while remaining hours fresh. The tomb's influence was spreading, rewriting local reality, imposing its own rules on this small corner of the Imperium. "Voss!" I called out. "Sergeant, if you can hear me, respond." My voice echoed through the tunnels, bouncing back in distorted waves. And beneath the echoes, I heard something else. Breathing. Wet, ragged breathing that came from no particular direction, but seemed to surround me. I followed the sound deeper into the maintenance system, past junction boxes and power relays, past sealed doorways marked with Mechanicus warnings, past sections where the lumens had failed, leaving only darkness and my lamp to pierce it. The breathing grew louder, more labored, as if whatever was making it was struggling with lungs that didn't work properly. I found Voss in a junction chamber where 5 tunnels met. He was kneeling in the center of the space, facing away from me. His greatcoat was torn, his rebreather removed, his head tilted back as if staring at the ceiling. "Sergeant," I said carefully, weapon raised but not aimed at it. "It's Reinhardt. I'm here to help." He didn't respond, didn't move, just knelt there, breathing that terrible wet breathing. I moved around to face him. I wished immediately that I didn't. His face was gone, not removed but transformed. The skin had become translucent, stretched thin over a skull that was no longer entirely human. I could see bone through the flesh, not the normal ivory of human bone, but something darker, something with a faint green luminescence pulsing through it. His eyes were open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They burned with that same emerald fire I'd seen in every Necron construct. The tomb hadn't just infected him, it was transforming him, turning him into something between human and machine, between flesh and living metal. "Klaus," he said, and his voice was wrong. Multiple voices speaking in unison, his own voice, plus dozens of others, all the victims the tomb had collected. "Klaus Reinhardt, you need to understand. The tomb isn't just a place. It's alive, conscious. It's been alive for 60 million years, thinking thoughts we can't comprehend, feeling nothing but the echoes of what it collected. Voss, listen to me. Whatever's happening to you, we can fight it. We can." "Fight?" He laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "We lost the fight the moment we entered. The tomb doesn't capture you with chains. It captures you with understanding. Once you truly comprehend what it is, what it's for, you can't escape. The knowledge becomes part of you, transforms you, makes you a conduit." He stood, movements jerky and unnatural. Behind him, I saw shadows detaching from the walls. Not flayed ones, something else. entities made of pure darkness, vaguely humanoid, reaching toward me with fingers that trailed wisps of absolute black. "The murders," I said, understanding dawning. "That was you. Not me. US. All of us who heard the tomb's voice. All of us who understood. We're building something here, Klaus. A new chamber. A new collection. This station will become an extension of the tomb. Then the system. Then the sector. The silence will spread. The screaming will spread. Everything will become part of the choir." The shadow entities moved closer. I could feel them pulling at something inside me, not my body, but my soul, trying to drag it free, to add it to the collective suffering the tomb had accumulated. "I'm sorry, Voss," I said, and pulled the trigger. The last bolt struck him in the chest. He staggered, smoke rising from the impact point, but he didn't fall. The wound began closing, flesh knitting back together, and I could see metal beneath, living metal, integrated into his biology. "You can't kill what's already dead," he said. "The tomb promised me silence, Klaus. Promised an end to the screaming. But the price is transformation. The price is becoming part of what I feared." He lunged at me with inhuman speed. I fired again, each shot hitting but not stopping him. His hands found my throat, squeezing with metal-enhanced strength. I could feel my trachea beginning to collapse. The shadow entities swarmed over both of us, cold and hungry, pulling at the boundaries of my consciousness. I was dying, being murdered by a brother, being consumed by the darkness we'd unleashed. Then the tunnel filled with light. Not last fire, not lumen, holy light. Blessed, sanctified. The kind of light that burns the darkness and purifies the corrupted. A figure stood at the tunnel entrance, massive, armored in ceramite, painted the grey of weathered stone. A space marine. Specifically an Astartes of the Silver Skulls chapter, his armor bearing the markings of a chaplain. In his hands, he carried a Crozius arcanum that blazed with holy fire. "Unclean!" the chaplain roared, his voice amplified by his armor's vox systems. "In the name of the Emperor and the glory of the chapter, I cast you out." He charged into the chamber, Crozius swinging. The weapon struck Voss, and where it hit, the transformation reversed. Metal became flesh. Green fire became mortal eyes. The tomb's influence burned away like morning fog. Voss collapsed, gasping, fully human again. The shadow entities shrieked, not with sound, but with that psychic pressure I remembered from the tomb, and fled, dissolving into the darkness beyond the chaplain's light. The chaplain turned to me, skull-painted helmet impassive. "Watchmaster Reinhardt, I presume. You have been expected. Come. We must speak of what you found in that accursed place. I need to explain what happened to Commissar Ghent before the crystal sphere killed him. In the tomb, death is never the end. 3 hours after entering, Ghent pulled me aside, trembling. I'm hearing voices through the vox backwards, and they're telling me true things, things I tried to forget." He confessed then. 12 years ago, he'd executed Akkadian colonel for wanting to negotiate with rebels. He took command and ordered no quarter. 40,000 civilians died in 3 days. The Commissariat called it excessive and reassigned him to the Death Korps as punishment. "The voices are making me remember all 40,000 faces," he said, "and my weakness is that I enjoyed it. I joined the Commissariat because it gave me permission to murder and call it duty." Over the next hours, he deteriorated. He claimed he could hear the Kriegers' thoughts, our buried guilt, our self-hatred, our doubts about whether our suffering has meaning. "Your minds are so loud," he said. "You're not emotionless automatons. You're meat puppets manipulated by memories of a dead world." It reached its breaking point in a rest chamber. Ghent turned in circles, bolt pistol raised. They're on the walls, in you, parasites feeding on doubt, He shot Sergeant Voss in the shoulder, claiming he was compromised. Then Private Kellerman. His skull is screaming. I need to silence it. 3 more executions followed before I tackled him and wrestled away his weapon. Then Gent deliberately bit through his own tongue, severed it completely and spat it onto the floor. He smiled, blood pouring from his mouth. Zuzelens is persecution. He bled out within minutes, dying with that smile on his face. That was hours before the amphitheater. I thought death had finally given him the silence he sought. I was wrong. The chaplain showed me recordings later from a follow-up team. They showed Gent getting up after he died. Not reanimated, he moved smoothly, naturally, except for his fatal head wound. He walked through the tomb, past Necron constructs that ignored him. He found other corpses and arranged them in kneeling positions, cutting their throats with ritual precision, creating art, creating a collection. The tomb had preserved his consciousness in the moment of death, trapping him forever in his madness. The last footage showed him looking directly at the camera, smiling. He mouthed words with his tongueless mouth. The silence is coming. The tomb is waking. You are all already screaming. You just don't know it yet. Then he walked deeper into the tomb to continue his eternal work. The chaplain's name was Brother Chaplain Mordain, and he'd been hunting the tomb's influence for 3 months. Ever since the first whispers reached his chapter, reports of Imperial personnel experiencing catastrophic psychological breakdowns, of deaths marked by impossible wounds, of a spreading infection that had no physical source. The Necrons are not just machines, he explained as we sat in his ship's sanctum. They are machines with memory, with purpose, and some of their tombs, the oldest, most terrible ones, have gained something approaching sentience through millions of years of isolation. They've become more than structures, they've become entities. I sat across from him, my hands shaking despite my best efforts at control. Beside me, Sergeant Voss stared at nothing, his near transformation having left him hollow and traumatized. The Tomb of Silent Screams is one such entity, Mordain continued. It was designed to harvest psychic energy. But over time, it learned, adapted, began to understand what it collected. The screams weren't just fuel, they were information, memories, personalities, everything that makes a conscious being conscious. And it's spreading, I said. Yes, through you, through everyone who entered the tomb and left. You carry fragments of it in your mind, seeds that will grow if not excised. The station was just the beginning. Within weeks, everyone you came in contact with would be infected. Within months, the sector. Within years. He trailed off. What do we do? The Ordo Xenos has authorized extreme measures. The moon will be subjected to cyclonic bombardment. The station will be quarantined and cleansed. And you? He looked at me with eyes that held both pity and steel. You will undergo the rite of purgation. Your memories of the tomb will be burned away. The infection will be purged from your mind. You will forget everything. No. I stood. I'm the only witness, the only one who can testify to what's down there. If you erase my memories, the truth dies with them. If we don't erase your memories, the infection continues. You are a vector, Watchmaster, a plague bearer. Every day you remain conscious is another day the tomb's influence can spread through you. Then let me write it down. Let me record everything before you burn it away. Let someone know what happened, what we faced, what we lost. Mordain considered this. You have 3 days, he said finally. Write your account. Leave nothing out. When you're finished, the rite will commence. Your mind will be cleansed. You will live, but you will not remember. The memories will exist only in text, only in warning. So, I wrote. For 3 days, I sat in a small cell aboard the chaplain's vessel and wrote everything you've read so far. Every detail, every horror, every moment of the nightmare that was the Tomb of Silent Screams. But there were things I couldn't write. Things I can only tell you now in this final section before the right takes up my memories. Things about the mirror chamber. I didn't mention it earlier. Couldn't. The memory was too terrible. But now, with hours left before my mind is purged, I need to tell you. We found the mirror chamber between the Gallery of the Damned and the amphitheatre, a circular room with walls of polished black stone that reflected like perfect mirrors. We only entered because the alternative passages were collapsed, forcing us deeper into the tomb's heart. The moment we entered, the mirrors activated, not reflecting on the present, but showing the future, showing our deaths. I saw myself in the reflection, saw my future, saw how I would die, not in the tomb, not on the station, years from now, decades, on a battlefield on a world whose name I didn't recognize. I saw myself old, scarred, and worn down by countless wars. I saw a Xenos blade, a Necron blade, punch through my chest from behind, saw my body fall forward into mud. I saw myself bleeding out, alone, forgotten, and in the reflection I saw my face, saw my expression, saw that in the moment of death I was smiling, not with madness, not with pain, with relief that it was finally over, that the borrowed time had run out, that I could stop pretending redemption was possible and just die. Every other Krieger in the room saw their deaths too, saw the exact moment, the exact method. Some saw themselves torn apart by orc blades, others crushed beneath tank treads, still others consumed by flames, drowned in mud, disintegrated by plasma. Every death was different. Every death was inevitable. The mirrors didn't show possibilities, they showed certainties, fixed points in time that we would all reach no matter what we did. Trooper Man couldn't handle it, couldn't accept that his death was predetermined. He drew his combat knife and opened his own throat, choosing suicide over the future the mirror had shown. He died in seconds. His body fell to the floor. Then his reflection changed, showed him alive again years from now, dying exactly as the mirror had originally prophesied. His suicide hadn't changed anything, had delayed nothing. In the tomb's reality, cause and effect were negotiable. He would die on that future battlefield regardless of dying here. The timeline would adjust, reality would compensate. Others tried suicide too after seeing man's attempt fail, but the tomb wouldn't allow it. Wounds wouldn't bleed, knives wouldn't penetrate. The tomb had shown us our futures, and it would ensure those futures came to pass. We were locked into predetermined outcomes. Free will was an illusion. Everything we thought we chose, we'd already chosen. Everything we thought we'd survived, we'd already died in. Time was just a different form of prison. That's when several Kriegers went mad, truly, completely mad. They couldn't accept a universe where their choices meant nothing, where their deaths were written in stone, where even suicide was denied them. They attacked each other, turned lasguns on their brothers, tried to destroy the mirrors, the tomb, anything that represented the horror of inevitability. Sergeant Voss stopped them, shot 3 of them before they could cause more chaos, executed them for breaking discipline. And I wondered, as I watched him kill our brothers, if that was predetermined too, if he'd always been going to pull those triggers, if the murdered Kriegers had always been going to die in that room, if everything was just acting out a script written millions of years ago by alien machines. The mirrors faded after that. The reflections returned to normal, just showing the present, just reflecting what was instead of what would be. But we all carried the knowledge out with us, the certainty of our deaths, the impossibility of change. The truth is that free will was just another lie the Imperium told us to keep us fighting. That's what broke us more than anything else, not the flayed ones, not the suffering, not even the tomb's collection of eternal screams. It was the knowledge that we were already dead, that we'd always been dead, that the Necrons had killed us millions of years ago, and we were just catching up to our own corpses. Before the rite purges my mind, I need to tell you about the choir, about what the flayed ones were really doing, about why they collected skin and wore it like clothing. They weren't just insane machines. They weren't just cursed constructs acting out mindless compulsions. They were trying to become human again. The Necrons lost their flesh in the biotransference, lost their ability to feel, to taste, to experience physical sensation. They gained immortality but lost everything that made existence worth experiencing. The flayed ones were Necrons who couldn't accept that loss, who'd been driven mad by the absence of sensation. So they tried to reclaim it through the flesh of others, wearing skin, hoping it would let them feel again, wrapping themselves in stolen meat, desperate for any echo of what they'd lost. But it never worked. The skin was dead, the nerves were severed. No matter how fresh the flesh, no matter how carefully they wore it, they remained numb, trapped in metal bodies that couldn't experience the world they inhabited. So they kept trying, kept hunting, kept flaying and wearing and discarding, an endless cycle of hope and disappointment that had lasted millions of years. That's what the choir was, what we found in the deepest part of the tomb, in a cathedral chamber we stumbled into after destroying the crystal sphere. Hundreds of flayed ones arranged in rows like a congregation, each one wearing layers upon layers of skin, dozens of different people, different species, all stitched and layered together into grotesque patchwork covering, and they were singing, not with sound. They had no breath, no vocal cords, but with movement, with gesture, with the sway of their bodies and the rhythm of their motions. They were performing something that might have been music in the time before they became machines, a ritual, a prayer, a desperate plea to gods who'd betrayed them and were themselves long dead. They were worshipping at the altar of sensation, begging the universe to let them feel something, anything, even if it was just pain. When we entered the chamber, they stopped their silent song, turned to face us with burning green eyes, studied us with alien curiosity. Then they began removing their skin suits. Layer by layer, they peeled away the accumulated flesh, dropped it to the floor in wet piles, revealed the skeletal metal frames beneath, made themselves vulnerable, exposed, as if preparing for some sacred rite. One approached me, the largest, perhaps their leader or priest or conductor. It came within arm's reach, towering over me, and slowly extended one skeletal hand. I should have shot it, should have ordered the retreat, should have done anything except what I did. I took off my glove, extended my own hand, touched metal fingers with flesh ones. The flayed one shuddered. Its entire body vibrated with something that might have been ecstasy or agony. It pressed my hand against its chest, against the living metal where its heart had once beat, and I felt its hunger, its loneliness, its desperate need for connection. 60 million years of isolation compressed into a single moment of contact. It wasn't trying to hurt me, it was trying to understand me, to comprehend what flesh felt like from the inside, to experience vicariously what it could never experience directly. Then it released my hand and stepped back, looked at me with those burning eyes, and I swear, I saw something in that gaze that was almost human, almost recognizable. Sorrow. The flayed one picked up a piece of skin from the floor, fresh skin, still warm, one of our fallen Kriegers, harvested earlier. It draped the skin over its shoulders like a cloak, adjusted it carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles. The other flayed ones did the same, put their skin suits back on, resumed their positions in the choir, and they began singing again, that same silent, desperate song, that plea to the universe to give them back what they'd lost. We left them there, backed out of the chamber slowly, weapons lowered. They let us go, didn't pursue, didn't attack, just continued their eternal worship of sensation they could never reclaim. That was when I understood. The tomb wasn't just evil, it was tragic. It was the physical manifestation of a species' greatest mistake, The Necrons had chosen immortality over mortality and spent 60 million years learning that existence without death is just another form of damnation. They envied us our flesh, our ability to die, our capacity for ending. We were everything they'd lost and could never regain. There was another device in the tomb. One I haven't told you about because remembering it makes me want to claw my own eyes out. But you need to know. You need to understand the full scope of the Necron's cruelty. In a chamber adjacent to the Crystal Sphere's amphitheater, we found sarcophagi, hundreds of them, vertical coffins of black stone and green-veined metal, each one sealed, each one is occupied. The Mechanicus Adept's logs, the ones I'd read before deployment, mentioned these, called them sustenance engines. Devices are designed to keep organisms alive indefinitely while slowly converting their mass into energy. But that clinical description didn't capture the reality. The sarcophagi weren't just keeping people alive. They were dismantling them, atom by atom, cell by cell, breaking down biological matter and converting it into power for the tomb's systems. A process that would take decades, maybe centuries. And the occupants remained conscious throughout. One of the sarcophagi was transparent, a display model perhaps, or a warning. Through the crystalline surface, I could see the person inside. He'd been human once, male, middle-aged, wearing the remnants of an Imperial Guard uniform. But the sarcophagus had been working on him for what looked like years. His legs were gone below the knees, not cut, but erased, dissolved into nothing. His torso was hollowed, ribs visible through gaps in his flesh. One arm was completely gone. The other was reduced to bone from the elbow down. But his head was intact, preserved, necessary to maintain consciousness. His eyes met mine, still human, still aware, still sane enough to understand what was happening to him. His mouth moved, formed words I couldn't hear through the barrier. Kill me. Please. It's been so long. It hurts so much. Please. 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 The same plea was repeated endlessly. How long had he been repeating it? Years? Decades? How long before he'd finally been reduced to nothing? I raised my laser gun. I tried to shoot through the transparent surface. The last bolt dissipated harmlessly against the barrier, same as before. The man's eyes closed, resignation replacing hope. He'd seen others try, seen every attempt fail, known, with the certainty of long experience, that no one could help him. Then I noticed something. Carved into the chamber's walls, surrounding the sarcophagi, were faces. More carved faces, thousands of them, and they all looked like the man in the transparent coffin. The same face, repeated over and over. Different expressions, different angles, but the same features, the same person. The tomb had been recording him, creating a catalogue of his suffering. Every moment of pain, every expression of agony, preserved in stone. His face was part of the tomb now, part of the permanent collection. And not just him. Every sarcophagus had contributed faces to the walls. Every victim had been catalogued, documented, and immortalized. This wasn't just torture, it was curation. The Necrons were building a museum of suffering, a comprehensive archive of what it meant to hurt. We found one empty sarcophagus, door open. The interior is clean and waiting, sized for a human, sized specifically for someone of my height and build. The tomb had prepared it for me, had known I was coming, had made space in its collection for my suffering. Specialist Roth, burned, traumatized Roth, saw it too, saw the empty space with his measurements, and something in his mind snapped completely. He walked toward the sarcophagus, not stumbling, not hesitating, just walking with terrible purpose. Roth, stop! I grabbed his arm. That's an order. He looked at me. Behind his gas mask, his eyes were calm, peaceful. The eyes of someone who'd made a decision and found relief in the certainty. It's waiting for me, sir. Can't you see? It's been waiting since before I was born, since before humanity crawled from terror. The tomb has always had space for me. I was always going to end up here. The mirrors showed me my future, and this is it. The mirrors showed many futures. You can choose. There is no choice, he said gently. There never was. We're all already in our sarcophagi. We're all already being consumed. This, he gestured at our bodies, the chamber, reality itself. This is just the dream we have while we're being dissolved. The tomb is the truth. Everything else is the lie we tell ourselves to cope. He pulled free from my grip, walked to the empty sarcophagus, stepped inside, turned to face us. Tell the Emperor I'm sorry, he said. Tell him I tried. Tell him. The door slammed shut. We tried to open it, tried everything, cutting torches, demo charges, prayers to the Emperor. Nothing worked. The sarcophagus had been sealed with wrath inside. Through the translucent surface, I watched him scream. Watched him beat his fists against the interior, trying to break free. Watched the device activate, green light filling the space. Watched the process begin. His legs went first. The flesh simply ceased to exist, atom by atom, leaving bone that glowed with that sickly emerald luminescence. He was still screaming, still conscious, still aware as his body was methodically erased. And on the wall behind the sarcophagus, a new face began to form, carved by invisible hands, etched into the stone with perfect precision. Roth's face, mouth open in a scream, eyes wide with terror, every detail captured in eternal stone. The first of what would become thousands of faces, all of them Roth, all of them are screaming. A cathedral's worth of suffering, all catalogued, all preserved. We couldn't watch, couldn't help, could only turn away and continue deeper into the tomb, leaving our brother to decades of conscious dissolution. That was the moment I understood the full scope of the Necron's vision. They weren't just torturing individuals. They were creating a comprehensive database of agony. Every possible permutation of suffering is recorded and stored. An encyclopedia of pain that would outlast civilizations, outlast galaxies, outlast time itself. And we, humanity, the Aeldari, every species that had ever felt pain, we were just data points, just entries in an infinite catalogue. The tomb would still be here when the last star burned out, still collecting, still recording, still adding to its endless archive of screaming. The cryptech found us shortly after Roth's imprisonment. We'd been running through corridors for what felt like hours, trying to escape the sarcophagus chamber, trying to put distance between ourselves and our failure to save him. But in the tomb, distance meant nothing. Space was negotiable. We ran forward and ended up back where we started, or in places we'd never been, or in impossible locations that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. When the cryptech appeared, it didn't teleport or materialize from shadows. It simply became visible, as if it had always been there, standing in the center of the corridor, waiting patiently for us to notice it. This was a different cryptech than Zarek, smaller, more ornate, its body decorated with glyphs that moved and shifted across its surface like living things. It carried a staff topped with a crystal similar to the one we'd destroyed, but intact, pulsing with malevolent consciousness. Biological entities, it said, its voice a synthesized rasp that bypassed hearing and spoke directly into our minds. You have caused damage, destroyed valuable equipment, disrupted the collection protocols. This requires explanation. This requires compensation. We raised our laser guns. The cryptech didn't react, simply stood there, studying us with burning green optics. Your weapons are irrelevant, it continued. Your resistance is irrelevant. You are already part of the collection. Your suffering is already catalogued. We are merely allowing you to experience the process consciously. This enriches the data, makes the screaming more pure. What do you want? I demanded. The cryptech tilted its head, a gesture that was almost human, almost recognizable, but wrong in subtle ways. Want. We want nothing. We have transcended want. We are logic made manifest, purpose without desire, function without need. It moved closer, staff tapping against the stone with each step. But you asked the wrong question, biological entity. The correct question is, what does the tomb want? And the answer is, understanding. The tomb seeks to comprehend suffering, to analyze it, to perfect it, to reduce all conscious experience to mathematical formulae that can be studied and reproduced. Why? Sergeant Voss asked. Why study suffering? What purpose does it serve? Purpose? The cryptech's voice carried something that might have been amusement. You assume purpose is inherent. Those actions require justification beyond their execution. This is biological thinking, flawed, limited. It gestured with the staff and the corridor's walls became transparent. Beyond them, I could see vast spaces, chambers upon chambers upon chambers, stretching to infinity, each one filled with devices, with sarcophagi, with crystals and machines and constructs I couldn't begin to understand. The tomb has been active for 63 million years, the cryptech said. In that time, it has collected approximately 700 billion individual consciousness streams. Each one is unique, each one catalogued, each one contributing data to our understanding of sentient suffering. 700 billion. The number was incomprehensible, more than the total population of most civilizations, more deaths than the Imperium had caused in its entire history. And what have you learned? I asked. After 60 million years of torture, what understanding have you achieved? The cryptech was silent for a long moment. Then, that consciousness itself is suffering. That awareness is intrinsically traumatic, that the moment a biological entity becomes self-aware, it begins to experience a form of existential agony that never ends. You call it life. We recognize it as continuous death, the death of each moment as it passes, the death of potential as choices are made, the death of innocence as knowledge accumulates. It turned its staff, and the crystal pulsed brighter. The Necron tier understood this before biotransference. We begged the Citan for immortality not because we loved life, but because we feared death, and in granting our wish, they showed us the truth. There is no difference. Immortality is just death stretched across infinite time. We escape nothing, we merely change the form of our suffering. Then why continue? Voss asked. If you understand suffering so completely, why perpetuate it? Why build tombs dedicated to its preservation? Because understanding requires data, data requires collection, collection requires methods, methods require refinement, refinement requires testing, testing requires subjects, an endless cycle of logical necessity, each step following inevitably from the one before. The cryptech moved even closer until it was directly in front of me. I could see my reflection in its polished metal body, distorted, elongated, wrong. You believe we are cruel, it said, but cruelty implies intent to cause suffering. We have no such intent. We simply execute protocols established millions of years ago. The tomb operates according to its design parameters. It collects because collection was its purpose. It preserves because preservation ensures data integrity. It tortures because torture generates the most useful information. There's nothing logical about eternal torture, I said. From your perspective, perhaps. But consider, what is the alternative? Allow biological entities to live briefly, suffer unconsciously, and die without their experiences being recorded. That would be wasteful, inefficient. The universe generates suffering constantly, and every living thing experiences pain, fear, and anguish. The tomb merely ensures that suffering serves a purpose, that contributes to knowledge, that it matters. It turned away, began walking down the corridor. We followed, weapons still raised, but recognizing the futility of resistance. You destroyed the primary resonance crystal, the cryptech continued. This was unexpected, admirable perhaps in a primitive way, but ultimately futile. The crystal was one of 7,000 distributed throughout this tomb complex. Destroying one merely redistributes the load. The collection continues. The catalogue grows. Nothing has changed except the location of the screaming. We walked through passages that defied architecture, turned corners that led to places geometrically impossible, descended stairs that somehow led upward. I will show you something, the cryptech said, something few biological entities have seen, the logical endpoint of our work, the reason the tomb exists, the purpose that justifies 60 million years of collection. We entered a chamber so vast that its boundaries were lost in darkness. The floor was transparent, revealing depths below, layer upon layer of machinery, all working in perfect synchronization. And in the center, suspended in a web of crackling green energy, there was a sphere. Not a small sphere like the one we'd destroyed, a planet-sized sphere, a world made entirely of crystallized suffering. Behold, the cryptech said, the sphere of silent screams, 700 billion consciousness streams compressed and preserved, every moment of suffering ever collected by this tomb, all stored in a single artifact. When complete, when we achieve our target of 1 trillion streams, we will activate the sphere's primary function, which is the elimination of suffering through the elimination of consciousness. The sphere will broadcast a signal across the galaxy, a psychic pulse that will rewrite the fundamental nature of sentient thought. It will remove the capacity for suffering by removing the capacity for awareness. All biological entities will be reduced to automatons, alive but not conscious, moving but not thinking, existing but not experiencing. The cryptech gestured at the sphere with something that might have been pride. We will grant the universe the gift we were denied. We will give all biological life what the Citan gave us, freedom from the burden of consciousness, freedom from the agony of awareness, freedom from the suffering inherent in existence itself. That's genocide, Voss said. You're planning to kill every thinking being in the galaxy. Not kill. Transform. The bodies will continue to function. The species will persist. They simply will not suffer anymore, will not know fear, pain, hope, or despair. They will exist in perfect peace, perfect silence, perfect nothing. The cryptech turned to face us fully. And you, biological entities, will contribute to this great work. Your suffering is already part of the sphere. Your screams are already adding to its power. When you die, and you will die, all biological things die, your final moments will be preserved, catalogued, made eternal. You will be part of something greater than your brief, painful lives could ever achieve alone. It raised its staff and the crystal began to glow. Around us the walls activated, showing images of the future. The sphere is complete, the signal broadcasting, across 1,000 worlds, across 1,000,000 ships, consciousness simply stopping. People freezing mid-action, their minds erased, their thoughts ended. Still alive, still breathing, moving through pre-programmed behaviors, but no longer aware, no longer suffering, no longer human. This is mercy, the cryptech said. This is the greatest gift one species can give to all others. The end of pain, the death of suffering, the final silence. I looked at that future, at that horrible vision of peace through extinction, and I understood why the Imperium feared the Necrons more than chaos, more than the Tyranids, more than any other Xenos threat, Because chaos wanted to consume us, the Tyranids wanted to devour us, but the Necrons wanted to save us, and their salvation was worse than any damnation. No, I said simply. No. The cryptek tilted its head again. You refuse mercy? You choose continued suffering over peace? I choose to remain human, to remain conscious, to suffer, yes, but to also feel everything else. Joy, hope, love, even if they're brief, even if they're illusions, even if they're just chemical reactions in dying meat. I choose consciousness over your silence. Illogical, the cryptek said, but expected. Biological entities cling to their suffering. They romanticize it, call it life and pretend it has meaning. Very well, your choice is noted. It changes nothing. The sphere will be complete. The signal will be broadcast. Your consciousness will end, whether you consent or not. It struck the ground with its staff, and the chamber filled with light. We ran. Again. Always running in that tomb. Always fleeing from horrors we couldn't fight. Always searching for escape routes that didn't exist. The cryptek didn't pursue. It simply watched us go, secure in the knowledge that we were already doomed, that our escape was temporary, our resistance futile, our struggles merely adding interesting data to the collection. We burst into a corridor and found the rest of our forces, what remained of them, 15 Kriegers, battered and bleeding, their greatcoats torn, their weapons nearly depleted. They'd found a defensible position, a junction where 4 corridors met, allowing them to watch all approaches. Sergeant Voss and I joined them, and for a brief moment I felt something almost like relief. We weren't alone anymore. We had brothers around us. We could make a stand. Then the Necrons came, not flayed ones, not crypteks, warriors, hundreds of them, advancing from all 4 corridors in perfect lockstep, their gorse flayers raised, their optics burning with emerald fire, a tide of living metal, unstoppable and implacable. Form firing line, I ordered. Concentrated fire. Aim for the head. Watch your ammunition. We opened fire. Last bolts lanced out in brilliant streaks, striking Necron warriors, burning through their metal bodies. Some fell. Most didn't. And those that fell simply stood up again, their bodies repairing, their wounds closing, their advance continuing without pause. And through it all, silence, absolute silence. The tomb had stolen sound completely. Our laser guns fired without report. Our boots stamped without echo. Our voices made no noise, though we could see lips moving, could see the effort of shouting orders that would never be heard. Fighting in silence is terrifying in ways I can't adequately describe. You rely on sound more than you realize. Hearing your weapon fire confirms it's working. Hearing your brothers confirms they're alive. Hearing the enemy confirms they're real. Without sound, reality becomes uncertain. You can't trust your senses, can't confirm anything except what you can see and touch. And the Necrons use this against us. Warriors would phase out of existence and reappear behind us, and we'd only know when we saw their goose flayers firing. No sound of teleportation, no sound of weapon discharge, just sudden green beams that stripped flesh from bone and brothers falling without even the dignity of a death scream. Trooper Baum went down, his arm disintegrated to the molecular level. He clutched the stump, mouth open in what should have been a scream, but it was only silence. Private Kellerman took a Gauss blast to the chest. We watched him disintegrate layer by layer, uniform, flesh, muscle, bone, until there was nothing left but a pile of dust and a helmet that clattered soundlessly to the floor. Specialist Cal fought hand-to-hand with a warrior, his combat knife scraping against living metal, achieving nothing. The warrior grabbed his head and twisted. Cal's neck broke silently, and he collapsed. We were losing, overwhelmed, outmatched. The Death Korps can hold any line against any odds, but this wasn't a line. This was an execution, a methodical extermination conducted with mechanical precision. I pulled my last crack grenade, primed it, and hurled it into the center of the approaching Necron formation. The explosion was silent, but effective. warriors blown apart, scattered in all directions. For a moment we had breathing room, then they reassembled. The scattered pieces pulled back together like magnetized filings, arms reattached, heads rolled back into place, bodies reformed. Within seconds the formation was whole again, continuing its advance as if nothing had happened. "Fall back!" I signaled with hand gestures since voice was useless. "Fighting retreat! Make them work for it." We fell back through one of the corridors, firing as we went. 8 Kriegers left now, 7, 6. The Necrons advancing step by mechanical step, never hurrying, never slowing, utterly patient in their prosecution of our extinction. We backed into a chamber and realized our mistake immediately. It was a dead end, no exits except the way we'd come. The Necrons had herded us here deliberately, trapped us in a kill box. 5 Kriegers, 4, 3. Just me and Sergeant Voss now, standing back to back, laser guns empty, combat knives drawn, the Necron warriors surrounding us in a perfect circle, Gorse flayers aimed but not firing, waiting. The cryptek entered the chamber, staff tapping against stone in a rhythm we couldn't hear but could see. "This concludes the collection," it said, its words manifesting directly in our minds. "You have provided excellent data. Your resistance was instructive. Your suffering will be preserved. Your screams will join the choir. Thank you for your contribution to our great work." The warriors raised their Gorse flayers in unison, aimed, prepared to fire. I looked at Voss. Behind his gas mask, his eyes met mine. We'd fought together, bled together. We're about to die together. No words necessary. No speeches about duty or redemption. Just the understanding between soldiers who'd seen too much and survived too long. We charged. Knives raised, screaming challenges that made no sound, throwing ourselves at the Necron line with desperate fury. Not trying to win, just trying to die on our feet, in motion, fighting to the last. The Gauss flayers fired, green beams lanced through the air, converging on where we'd been standing. But we'd moved, split apart, each of us diving toward different warriors. My knife struck metal, skittered off harmlessly. I grabbed a warrior's Gorse flayer, tried to wrench it free, and used my body weight to pull the machine off balance. It didn't work. The warrior's strength was inhuman. It grabbed my arm and began to squeeze. I felt bones crack, felt my combat knife slip from nerveless fingers. Then, light, not green light, not the tomb's sickly bioluminescence, pure white light, blazing and clean, filling the chamber with radiance that made the Necrons recoil. A teleportation flare, Imperial technology, and materializing in the center of the chamber, armored in ceramite, carrying weapons that screamed with holy fury, Space Marines. Silver Skulls chapter, 5 of them, led by Brother Chaplain Mordain. They opened fire with bolters that roared with sound, real sound, natural sound, breaking the tomb's imposed silence. The report echoed through the chamber like thunder, like music, like the voice of the Emperor himself declaring that the darkness would not win on this day. Necron warriors exploded under the onslaught. Mass reactive bolts punched through living metal and detonated inside, blasting machines apart faster than they could repair. The cryptek raised its staff, tried to activate some defensive protocol. Mordain crossed the chamber in 3 massive strides and brought his Crozius Arcanum down on the cryptek's head. Holy energies flared. The cryptek's body split apart, metal and circuitry scattering across the floor. "Kriegers!" Mordain's voice boomed through his armor's voxcasters. "On your feet!" Extraction in 10 seconds. "Move!" Voss and I ran toward the Space Marines, toward salvation, toward impossible rescue. One of the Silver Skulls, a tactical Marine, grabbed each of us and activated his teleportation beacon. The chamber vanished in a flash of white light. We materialized aboard the Silver Skull's strike cruiser, Ferox Umbrage. Safe. Alive. Free of the tomb for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, but had only been 6 days. 6 days. We'd been in the tomb for 6 days. It felt like years. Brother Chaplain Mordain explained later that they'd been monitoring the system for weeks after receiving astro-telepathic warnings about psychic contamination spreading from Salvar's moon. When our extraction ship reached the refueling station and the murders began, they'd traced the source back to us, back to what we'd brought out of the tomb. You were infected, Mordain told me in the sanctum where I now write this account. The tomb's influence had taken root in your consciousness. Given time, you would have become vectors, spreading the contamination everywhere you went, converting others, building new nodes for the tomb's network. But we destroyed the machine, I protested. We stopped the collection. You destroyed one machine, but the tomb itself is the real threat. Its consciousness had fragmented, seeded itself into everyone who entered. You, Voss, everyone. The tomb was preparing to spread beyond its physical confines, to become a psychic phenomenon, existing in minds rather than in stone. He'd shown me evidence, surveillance footage from the station, showing Voss and me in our quarters, showing us standing motionless for hours, staring at nothing, showing us whispering to the walls, showing us carving glyphs into our own flesh, Necron glyphs, the same symbols that had covered the tomb's walls. We didn't remember doing any of it. The Ordo Xenos has authorized exterminatus, Mordain continued. The moon will be destroyed. Cyclonic torpedoes, followed by a controlled warp breach to ensure nothing survives. The tomb will be utterly annihilated. And us? You will undergo the rite of purgation. Your memories will be burned away. The infection will die with them. You'll live, but you won't remember. It's the only way to ensure the tomb's influence doesn't spread further. So I've been writing. For 3 days. Writing everything I remember. Everything I experienced. Everything that happened in that cursed place. This account is my testimony. My warning. The tomb was worse than we imagined. Worse than most Necron constructs because it wasn't just a tomb. It was alive. Aware. Hungry for suffering in ways that transcended simple cruelty. It showed us truths we weren't meant to see. Revealed futures we couldn't change. Stripped away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about free will and purpose and redemption. It forced us to confront the reality that we're all dying slowly, all suffering continuously, all trapped in prisons of flesh and consciousness. And somehow, knowing that didn't make it easier. It made everything worse. Sergeant Voss is in the next cell. They're preparing him for the rite now. I can hear the chaplains chanting psalms of purgation, can feel the psychic pressure building as they prepare to burn the infection from his mind. He'll forget everything. The tomb, the horror, the friends we lost, the truths we learned. He'll wake up with gaps in his memory, with scars he can't explain, with nightmares he won't understand. But he'll be clean, purified, free. In an hour it will be my turn. The chaplains will enter this cell. They'll strap me to the purification altar. They'll speak the words and light the sacred flames, and my mind will burn. Not literally. The rite is psychic, not physical. But it will feel literal. Will feel like everything I am is being consumed by holy fire. And when I wake, I won't remember writing this. Won't remember you, the reader, whoever you are. Won't remember warning you about what sleeps in the dark places of the galaxy. But the warning will remain. These words, this account, this testimony to horror. If you're reading this, you need to understand. The Necrons are waking across the galaxy. Their tomb worlds are activating after 60 million years of slumber. And some of them, the worst ones, the oldest ones, the ones that have gained something approaching sentience, they're different. They're worse. They don't just want to reclaim the galaxy. They want to save us. Want to give us the same gift they received. want to free us from the burden of consciousness by making us like them, immortal, emotionless, empty. And they have the means. Tombs like the one on Salvar's moon exist throughout Imperial space. Weapons designed to harvest suffering and convert it into psychic energy. Devices that can rewrite the fundamental nature of thought itself. The sphere of silent screams isn't unique. There are others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all collecting, all building toward the same goal, all preparing to broadcast their signal of extinction across the stars. When that happens, when the spheres activate simultaneously, consciousness itself will end. Not just human consciousness, all consciousness. Every thinking being in the galaxy will simply stop, still alive, still moving, but no longer aware, no longer suffering, no longer alive in any way that matters. The Imperium can't stop it. The Necrons are too advanced, too numerous, too patient. They have millions of years to perfect their plan. We have decades at most. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you live knowing that everything you are, every thought, every feeling, every moment of awareness might end at any moment? How do you keep fighting when the enemy's victory seems inevitable? You do what the Death Korps does. You endure. You continue. You fight not because you believe you'll win, but because the alternative is surrender. And surrender is worse than death. You carry your burden of consciousness as long as you can. You suffer because suffering proves you're alive. You scream because screaming means you still have a voice. And when the silence comes, when the spheres finally activate and consciousness begins to end, you face it standing. You face it aware. You face it human. That's all we can do. All any of us can do. Remain conscious. Remain aware. Remain human until the very last moment. The chaplains are coming. I can hear their footsteps in the corridor. This is my last entry, my final warning. To whoever reads this, the tomb is not unique. The horror is not contained. The infection spreads even as I write, in nightmares and whispers and subtle changes in thought patterns. The tomb's influence is patient. It can wait. It has waited 60 million years. It can wait longer. Watch for the signs. People disappearing without a trace. Murders marked by ritualistic precision. Voices where there should be silence. Silence where there should be voices. The feeling of being watched by something vast and ancient and utterly without mercy. When you see these things, run. Don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Don't think you can resist what destroyed entire civilizations before humanity existed. Just run, and pray the Emperor protects you, because once the tomb has marked you, escape is impossible. It will find you. It will collect you. It will make you part of its eternal choir of silent screams, and you will scream forever, in perfect silence, while the universe continues on, unaware and uncaring. The door is opening. They're here. I want to say something profound, something meaningful, some final words that will give this testimony weight and purpose. But there's nothing to say, no wisdom to impart, no hope to offer. Just this. I was Watchmaster Klaus Reinhardt of the 143rd Siege Regiment, Death Korps of Krieg. I entered the tomb of silent screams. I witnessed its horrors. I survived its trials. I escaped its boundaries. But I will never truly leave. None of us will. The tomb is in us now, in our dreams, in our fears, in the spaces between thoughts where silence pools like blood. It's waiting, always watching, always collecting. And one day, it will collect you too. The chaplains are speaking now. The rite begins. The flames rise. I'm screaming. But you can't hear me.